It's another. Who was here last year? All right, we're doing all right then. Okay, I'm going to try to clip this mic here so I don't have to hold this. I think that's the purpose of this. So, can you hear me now? We're good? Yeah. Okay, perfect. All right, so, well, welcome to Ontario. My name is Lance Martin, the owner of Coldwell Banker Town & Country. And if you're a Town & Country agent, raise your hand. All right, that's good. We did a little better than last year. So most of you, we're kind of family here. I think for the most part, everybody in this room knows at least probably 20 to 30% of the other people in this room. I'd like to think I know all of you, some better than others, but at any rate, it's kind of one big family. So I want to thank all of our agents from Coldwell Banker Town & Country for joining us. And we've got a lot of other friends. If you're in the real estate business as a realtor, raise your hand. Okay, mortgage, title, affiliated, raise your hand. Okay, any buyers, sellers, investors, clients type, raise your hand. Oh, nice. Okay, that number's growing. That's good. That's good. All right, so at any rate, I want to welcome everybody again to our event. We've got a great panel. We've added one new speaker. If you were here last year, 3 of our 4 speakers are retreads, so to speak, but I'd pay to go see. As a matter of fact, I just saw Chris Thronberg speak. Anybody at the RioMac conference on Monday? Anybody go to RioMac? Okay, well, I was at the RioMac conference, which was interesting because anybody has been to the RioMac conference in the past? Okay, were you there when there was 3,000 people there a few years ago? Okay, well, there was 300 people there. Actually, I think I'm being generous. There's more people in this room today than were at the RioMac conference on Monday, which is interesting, but not necessarily surprising because most of the people that are going to that conference are looking for foreclosures and all the rest of that, which, that business model is sleeping right now. So, at any rate, real excited for the day. I've only got just a few comments I'm going to make, and then we're going to bring Bruce up. And matter of fact, let me go through my PowerPoint since I actually did this. The speakers that we have scheduled for today, Bruce is going to come up here probably in about 10 minutes. So Bruce, if you're out there, please queue up. Oh, there he is. He's good to go. I really want to thank Bruce because I know he hasn't been feeling well. Had a little bronchitis, and I've been struggling with that myself here on and off for the last week or so. And then literally, I think he had to rearrange his schedule a little bit because as soon as he's done here, he's jumping on a plane and heading up to Northern California somewhere to do a Norris group event or something he's got going on. So at any rate, who is here today just because Bruce is here? All right, which that could be dangerous if no one raised their hand. Oh my God! But that's a testimony. That's a testimony to Bruce and the Norris Group because Bruce is probably more available than the other speakers that we have. I mean, if you wanted to go see Bruce speak, the chances are probably pretty good you could find a schedule or find a place to see him locally. And see him. So the fact that you're here to listen to Bruce's opinion is good because he's certainly one, which is why I keep bringing these 3 guys back every year because they are on the top of my list of people I listen to. Dr. Husing will be here. I don't. John, are you in the building yet? Okay, well, he'll be here. He's coming up right after Bruce. Chris Thronberg is going to kind of take us home. He'll be our final speaker. I actually added this PowerPoint here, this slide here, because we have kind of a last minute. I think I'm a little too far away from my deal. Wake up. There we go. Iddo's going to come speak. Anybody know Iddo Benzeevi from Highland Fairview? Iddo's going to just do a brief 15 or 20 minute presentation in between Dr. Husing and Dr. Thronberg. If you're not familiar with Iddo, Iddo basically owns the east end of Moreno Valley, literally. And he is, if you've ever driven down the 60 freeway going from Moreno Valley towards Palm Springs area, you've seen the Skechers plant. That's his project, and all of the land that surrounds it's his project. So he's very committed to the logistics projects and getting that project done. So he's going to give us a brief update on what's going on with that project, but he has a very interesting, he did his presentation on the telephone with me last night, and I was spellbound. He's got some very interesting insight on commercial real estate and the impacts of companies like Amazon and some of the online vendors out there, what that means for the future of commercial real estate. So he's going to come in and give a brief presentation, and then Chris is going to take us home, and then we're going to do a Q&A after that. So those are our speakers that we have queued up. We've got some sponsors I would like to thank. Mountain West Financial, stand up, say hello. Okay. I want to thank everybody at Mountain West, and specifically Vilma and Christine and Stephanie and Matt and Irma and Bethany and Brian, which I think that's all of you guys. So thanks Mountain West for all your support. We appreciate it. We're going to have to maybe check this clicker, Stacy. This thing looks like it's not working so great. Either that or my thumb's a little too fat. I just skipped over Old Republic. We got Kathy and the gang with Old Republic. Stand up to Old Republic crew. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the support. Freedom Mortgage. Help! Freedom Mortgage is in the house. Where's our friends at Freedom Mortgage? There we are. Welcome, guys. I feel like Donald Trump up here. We're going to recognize all of our, and I want to thank Mississippi. Jeez. And I got steaks over here. Did you guys see that last night? Oh my God. Unbelievable. Wells Fargo, we've got about 30 people from Wells Fargo in the house. Where are you? All right. Thank everybody from Wells. And First American Natural Hazard Works, Stephen and the gang, he's in the back. Thanks for coming. We really appreciate it. Appreciate your support. I don't think we have anybody from our charities here today, but we've been supporting over the years Make-A-Wish and Wounded Warrior. So if you guys are so inclined on your way out, if you want to throw $10 in the bowl or something like that, that would be great. And we pretty much divide our charity stuff between Wounded Warrior and Make-A-Wish. Please start working better. And then our partners, Town & Country Escrow and Orange Coast Title. So thanks Annette and Susie and Jim from Orange Coast. And I don't think we have anybody here from our title company, or from our escrow company rather, but okay, we're going to put on that screen over, actually that was perfect timing. We're going to, in a minute, we're going to leave that phone number on the wall. It's going to switch here in a minute, but we're going to leave the 855-1973. If you have a question, text it to that number. We will pass the mic around. We've kind of gone back and forth with that over the years, but we will get the mic around after. But if you're mic shy and you just say, just have a real quick thing, we're going to go ahead and we'll put all those questions up on the screen when we're going to do a Q&A. We will do a brief Q&A at the end of each speaker, probably take 4 or 5 questions at the most. And then I know Bruce isn't going to be able to stick around. He's got to jump on a plane, but Dr. Husing and Dr. Thronberg, and I believe Iddo is going to stick around for a Q&A, and that'll start around noon, and then we'll probably finish 12:30, 12:45. So you can text your questions to that number. If you haven't written it down, don't worry. We're going to leave it up on the wall over there, and then you can text your questions there. I know you guys didn't come here to see me speak, so I'm just going to give you my 3-minute version on what I see going on here right now. And I just love this slide because that slide has certainly applied to me at various times in my career. There's lots of times where I just didn't want to know. Literally. I mean, I knew, but I didn't want to know. So that's kind of why we do these things. Dang it. It's screwing up my jokes. So our goal today is happy ostriches. So hopefully we're going to give you a little bit. I will tell you, I'll kind of preempt the presentation here a little bit. Although I'm never 100% sure what Bruce is going to say. I have a feeling that it may be cautious, but it'll certainly be an accurate opinion of what he feels is going on. But I just saw Chris Thornberg's presentation, and on balance, he has good things to say. So if you're in the real estate business and you make a living based upon buying and selling houses, you're probably going to be pretty happy when you leave here. And I think I've spoken to Dr. Husing, and generally speaking, I think you're going to be pretty happy with what both of these guys have to say. Iddo's got a very interesting take, which can be a little scary. It'd be interesting to see how we respond to what Iddo has to say. But at any rate, hopefully we'll have some happy ostriches when we get out of here today. I just threw this slide up interesting. I'm a political junkie. I'm not going to get into the politics side of it, other than to say, is anybody saying, because I'm not hearing this, but I certainly heard it in 2008, and I certainly heard it in 2012, is if we could just get past the election. Right? Everything's going to be fine as soon as we get past the election. I have not heard anybody say that. Okay? And the reason nobody's saying that is because they might be talking about stuff, but they're not talking about real estate. They're not talking about foreclosures. They're not talking about Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. They're not talking about loan modifications. So from my perspective, that excites me because I can remember in 2008, who was in the business actively selling or doing something in 08? A lot of fun, right? Unless you were doing REOs, that was not a fun marketplace. And I certainly said myself, and I heard others, just as soon as we get past the election. My candidate in 08 was John McCain, so you probably figured my politics out a little bit. But I can remember standing in the shower one morning with CNN on very loud in the background, and John McCain was speaking about something, and I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was something to the effect that the real estate market is broken and the government needs to fix it. And I let out a scream because that's not what I wanted my candidate to say. I wanted my candidate to say, we're going to let the market fix it, which of course is not what happened. And then of course McCain lost for that reason and a bunch of others, I'm sure. And then in 2012 it was pretty much the same thing, because by 2012 the real estate market certainly hadn't been fixed. And I was a Mitt Romney guy, and that went really well. But it was the same thing. The candidates were talking about the real estate economy is still bad, and it needs to be fixed, and the government's going to fix it. Well, again, we got past the election, and then now here we are another 4 years later, and irrespective of who wins, flip a coin, I suppose, but they're not talking about real estate. So I think that's a good thing. So hopefully they won't start. So we've got our election stuff behind us. This is just a real, I need help, I'm struggling. Let's just do this way. Okay, this is median price. Since we're in the Inland Empire, I thought I would share with you a little bit about what's going on in the Inland Empire. By the way, most of you are doing business in Inland Empire, Western Gabriel Valley, maybe a little bit of Orange County stuff. Yeah? Okay. Well, this is CRMLS median price. Median price in our area right now is $390,000. That's up 9.9% in the last 2 years. But this is median price today. It's up 0.5% in the last 12 months. Does that jive with what you guys are seeing? Right? So basically the last 12 months of the market, it's been basically flat.
Trying to find a way up there.
I don't know that that's a bad thing. Okay? Probably an argument that a little stability in property values isn't a bad thing. So that's where we are price-wise. This is interesting to me. I know these numbers are almost impossible, which, oh, by the way, I'll get this out of the way right now. If any of the presentations that you're looking at today will all be posted on our website, and we will email them to you, and we will get them to you. So if you're one of these people that's, I got to take a picture of that before it goes away, knock your socks off, but we will get all of the slides out for all the presenters to you. They'll be emailed to you certainly by the early next week, and it'll also be posted on our website. So you don't have to use them in your presentations, do what you want. This is just an interesting one. This is just an interesting one real quick. The blue chart is properties under contract in Moreno Valley. My roots are showing. Inland Empire. Pending sales are up over the last couple months. Okay? Solds are up over the last couple months. That's good, okay? Another thing that's on this chart, and this is the last chart I have, by the way, is we're going to have to get this fixed before Bruce gets here. This is actives. Do we have an inventory problem? Again? Yeah, we got an inventory problem again. It kind of snuck up on us. If you look at the active inventory in October in the Inland Empire, we had about 50,000 units for sale, okay? In December, that number was 40. We lost 20% of the listings from October to December. We've backfilled a little bit. We have about 42,000 listings on the market right now as of the end of February. All right? You compare that to a year ago, that number was 49,000. You compare it to 2 years ago, that number was 51,000. So it's interesting that we're not hearing a lot of talk about inventory problems, but we had some inventory issues out there. So multiple offers again and that sort of stuff. So at any rate, that's just my kind of quick take on, I'm trying to stop. Okay, so basically my gut check is I think we got a good year ahead. Okay, be interesting to see what Bruce and the rest of the gang have to say. So without any further ado, we're going to bring up Bruce and the rest of the gang. So everybody welcome Bruce Norris.
In 1970, I got married. I was 17. By the time I was 20, I'd sort of figured out I should own a home, and I bought my first house. I got a little bit serious about how things worked, and I read a report written by Howard Ruff, and he wrote a book called The Rough Times Ahead. Anybody read that? It was the first time I heard anything like that, and I took it really seriously. And in that book it said that if you had family, you had to be really concerned about making sure they had something to eat. And he said that you should buy 200 pounds of wheat for every person that lived in your household. And since I bought it hook, line, and sinker, I bought 1,000 pounds of wheat. I had 2 kids. I didn't want them to starve, so I bought 1,000 pounds of wheat and proceeded to move that wheat for the next 30 years around when I bought new houses. There were 2 things I learned from that. Number 1, wheat actually lasts a long time. We made bread the whole 30 years and it tasted just fine. And the second lesson I learned is don't buy anybody's opinion, hook, line, and sinker. Make your own decisions, okay? So you're going to hear today from a number of different people who have different takes because they have different sets of experiences. When you hear the other 2 speakers that are going to deal with the economics, they start with doctor, okay? So they have degrees in economics, and they're very smart guys. I know them both very well. I disagree with them often, which scares me to death. I always think, I hate that. The difference in our opinion sometimes happens because I've done this business for 30, 35 years now. And when I look at charts, I can relate it to a year and how it worked out for me. Does that make sense? So it's not a benign chart. In other words, I can look at that and go, I know you think that's positive, but it's really not. And some of that will happen today. We'll have charts that like it's one thing, and it means something else. Let me see if it's actually going to work. Not very good, but I want you to contemplate what you think the most important word in real estate is. Think about it. Because what you think is the most important word dictates sometimes what you do. And I'm going to share you a number of examples that have led me to understand what the most important word in real estate is for me. This is Grand Junction, Colorado, and that's a fourplex. Is that a really special looking fourplex or what? No grass, pretty bare bones. In about 1980, those sold for $180,000. About 5 years later, I bought all of the HUD repos, fourplexes in Grand Junction for $40,000. Same exact location. Somebody that was a buyer at $180,000 had to sell it to me for $40,000 to get out of it. Same product, same location, very different result. We're going to have problems. Palm Springs, what a lovely area. Isn't that nice? Nice, happy pictures. In 1988, I got a chance to buy 50 building lots from the Bass Brothers in Texas. They owned these 50 lots, and I happened to notice that no one was building on them and everything was going crazy at that time. I got to buy them, and I made over $1 million in 6 months as I sold them. And I thought, gosh, I really know what I'm doing here. It's so neat. So the next year I decided I would build 7 custom homes starting in 1989, and I get done with them in 1990. Anybody been around? 1990 wasn't such a hot year, and it kind of got gradually worse until 1995. So I donated that $1 million I made in 1988 to that project, basically, and it was then I was introduced to a short sale. Now, I didn't actually physically have to do a short sale, but I was protecting my investors' money with my own money. And our last sale, to close escrow, I had to write a check for $62,000 personally. That's called a personal short sale. And that was the end of my journey. It took me 3 years to get rid of that project. Same location. two very different results. You can't see this too well, but this is kind of a dilapidated sign, and I love what it says. Welcome to Rosamond, gateway to progress. Now, if you really intended that sign to be impactful, wouldn't you paint it once in a while? I think that kind of lends you to understand what happens in Rosamond is not much. Where is Rosamond? It's 9 miles outside of Lancaster. And what's outside of Lancaster? Nothing. 9 miles after nothing is Rosamond. I mean, when I was driving there for the first time, all the way there up until 9 miles, I said, oh, I'm not buying this. I'm not buying this. And I got off the street, and here I'm standing on 93 finished building lots, and they were offered to me for $3,000 a piece. And I called the guy up, I said, put it in escrow, it's the best deal I've ever seen. Now, in 1989, once again, somebody thought it was a really bright idea to build those lots in Rosamond. And they borrowed $3 million from a lender to make that happen. And that lender got 9% of his loan when I bought them. Same exact location, very different result. Lance, you're going to love this. This is well, you'll love it if I can bring it forward.
Struggling.
Thank you. That's a home in Moreno Valley. In 2006, this home sold for $355,000. In 2009, it sold for $64,000. I know that because I bought it. It's pending right now for $265,000. So here's a good question. What's market value? I love that definition, market value, the likely selling price of a property when the buyer and seller are equally knowledgeable, equally motivated, and then there's a little at the end of that that said, and the transaction is absent undue stimulus. Okay? In 2006, when this sold for $355,000, did we have transactional stimulus? No, you didn't need it. There were 12 comps that said $355,000. What we had was something much more dangerous, systemic stimulus. And the appraiser is not protected by a market that's gone crazy. But what was the systemic stimulus in that year? It was a lending world. We didn't care if people borrowed money they couldn't pay back. And so when you look at charts and say, well, this no longer makes sense, maybe it's a good time to sell. And so when I look at charts and make those decisions, in 2009, this is for sale for $64,000. Did we sell a lot of homes in 2009? No. It was 20 cents on the dollar, and yet people were afraid to buy it. Almost everything for sale was an REO. That's called reverse stimulus. When you're an investor, you have to get unattached emotionally and be able to make decisions that say, everybody is making an emotional decision. These numbers make a lot of sense. Does it make sense to buy that house at $64,000 if it rents for $1,300? But very few people did that because it felt so scary. We just made a decision last year to buy in Florida. I was going to interview Dave Duncan, chief economist at Fannie Mae, so I read their report. When I read the report, I found, that 25% of Fannie Mae's losses came from one state, Florida. When I read that, I called my friend up who lives in Orlando. I said, check around. There's got to be a developer that doesn't want what they have. And we just bought 38 building lots for $13,000 a piece that somebody paid $50,000 a piece to put there. Once again, using charts and what I understand about a market, be able to determine now at 265, why is that? Why did that happen? If you're in Hemet, if you want to pay 265, can't you buy a 3,000 square foot house? You can. in Moreno Valley, that's 1,400 square feet, built in 1980. And we know it's not in such a good area because it fell out of escrow one time, and the reason was the day after they bought it, they brought their family to see it, and there were, here's the description. We're canceling the escrow because when we went there was riffraff standing on the lawn. So this is my first cancellation due to riffraff. But in Hemet, you can buy a house that's about 3,000 square feet, built in '05. Now, why did that happen? Because this was in the crosshairs of people's interests that were called investors and hedge funds. They wanted this product because it made mathematical sense. Did they want a 3,000 square foot house in Hemet? No. What did we build in '04 and '05? Big mansions. We even nicknamed them. We didn't build 1,800 square foot new houses. We built 3,000 and 4,000 square foot houses. And when it became time to sell all those and foreclose on those, the only buyer was the guy that was going to occupy it. And it's going to take a while to absorb that at a price that's a discount. Can you build a 3,000 square foot house in Hemet for $260? No. So understanding how this all works and what's going on in your area and the product type reaction can make you wealthy if you do it right just one time. So I just got an email, and the topic was, expecting the market to crash. So is everybody here worried about that? Is that part of your concern? No? Okay, because I see a lot of big crowds in the beginning of the year, and people are worried. So I dealt with it. So to get to a peak price, let's take a look at historically what we have to do. You need sales momentum. We don't really have sales momentum in California. Are you doing that? Oh, okay. We don't have sales momentum. We have okay sales, bouncing around 400,000 units. But we don't have the kind of sales that usually leads us into a problem because, and we'll talk about why that is, but we have just okay numbers. Next. You need a buyer willing to make sacrifices to own. When we built Rosamond, which is 9 miles from Lancaster, in the middle of nowhere, we had 93 house sales. 90% of those people worked in LA and decided to buy a home in Rosamond. You know what that kind of drive is every day? But it was the only place they could put their name on a grand deed that said they own something. That was the mindset in '04 and '05. Does that mindset exist right now? Yes. No, it doesn't. It's very rare places. Honestly, that's my opinion. You don't have that ferocious, I got to own something or I'm going to get left behind. During 2004 and 5, I had to get my hair cut by 4 different people. Like, what happened to Mary? Oh, she went to be a real estate investor. I mean, that's what happened. Everybody started leaving and doing their thing. I don't feel that type of urgency. As a matter of fact, you have a whole generation that's come up and said, I don't even know if I want to own a house. One of the things I saw was an interview, the chief economist from Fannie Mae, Doug Duncan, and the guy that's on Shark Tank, Mr. Wonderful. One thing he said, though, was really kind of insightful. He said, I own 24 companies where the dominant employee is a millennial. They don't want to own anything, not even a car. I thought, wow, okay, that's insightful. So we haven't sold them on buying a house yet. I don't think there's that kind of push. This is, okay, next thing is you need lenders to say yes to capable and not capable buyers. So get to a pricing point where you max out. You have to have this huge amount of sales, and a lot of it comes on the back of lending policies that change and get loose. Has that occurred? No, it has not occurred. This is, in 2008, this is Fannie Mae, or excuse me, FHA's credit score, less than a 579 FICO score, 21% of their business, 619 to 580, 24%. Am I seeing that right, 21 or 23? Anyway, about 45% of FHA's business was under 619, and today is 5%. That's the big difference. So there's your big hole, is that are we selling to people that can't make their payment, they're marginal? Not a chance. You need that to happen before you get to a market peak. And we're not doing it. You need trustee sales to be nearing their lows for the cycle. This is a reactionary chart. What happens is foreclosures occur when they get shoved into action. And basically that happens from a series of charts. And we'll talk about some of those in a minute. Does it look like we are nearing a bottom of foreclosures? Yeah, in theory it looks like that. Did we solve our foreclosure problem the way we normally do? No, we just didn't foreclose on people. Every quarter you can see what Fannie Mae does with their foreclosures. They put a note sale. You know, there's $1 billion of notes for sale. They sell that, and the lender that buys it has instruction. Not on the top of the list is foreclose on the property. On the top of the list is go recast the loan. Make a deal. That's their assignment. So this foreclosure list is artificially low. So when you play with the system, it's hard to believe the numbers are telling you the same story. So I'm not too concerned that we're about to have an explosion in foreclosures, because that would surprise me at the level of some of the other charts that we're at. I'm sorry, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. You need construction and new homes to be strong and drive both employment and migration. I love when I hear, yeah, they're building everywhere. Really? Does this chart look like everywhere? As a matter of fact, we have never built less homes in the last, say, 6, 7, 8 years, ever, since 1950 in California. The building industry is still in the Great Depression as far as single-family homes. They build apartments, but they haven't built single-family homes. And one of the things that does is drives migration. And we've been absent that. We haven't had tons of construction workers have to show up to California to hammer nails on a house. So is this likely to change very quickly? It's doubtful. So this is not going to be a big driver. It hasn't been a big driver of employment, and it probably will get gradually better, but it's not been in place. What happens, one back. What's interesting about a builder, and you would think that they would have their finger on the pulse of the market, because they have a lot of risk. If anybody has to have some foresight in the market, it's a builder. Because let's say they buy a piece of land today, what's the likelihood of them building a house on land that needs to be developed within a year? Any chance? No. 2 years? Maybe 3? They have to have some pretty good insight and say, okay, 3 years from now, everything's going to be great. So they don't feel that way. So our subdivisions are still down by 85%. They can't look at land and say, I can buy that and with confidence develop that, and 3 years later have a winning project. So that's not what's been going on. But look what happens if you know the peak of the market. I'm a little at an angle here. But in 1989, they built a bunch of houses right at the end of the market, which means they bought a lot of land because they had to get ready for what was next. Was that a good idea? No. I made the same mistake, okay? So I completely agree with their mindset at the time. And then look at construction right up to the very peak of price, and then it died. There were a lot of builders that didn't think that crash was going to occur. I had a debate in front of the California Builders Association in late 2005, telling them if I were you, I would sell every house, every lot, every project, get the heck out of here. How do you think that went over to a builder in 05? There's no way, because they were having the time of their life, and then all of a sudden they didn't. So it's really important to be able to look at charts and say what's next. Go ahead, Aaron. You need an economy doing well enough to encourage household formation. We don't have that booming economy. We're having tepid growth. I think we're concerned that this growth will turn negative as well. So this is not driving household formation in consistent numbers over consistent years. You need owners with lots of equity to move up. 2015, the average net was 120 grand. The net in 2005 was over 200. So for the next purchase, you're bringing this pile of cash for a down payment. We're bringing almost half of what we did in '05. And so it's harder to have a move-up market without that big chunk of money. Next. You need a mix of sales to trust these sales to be near record lows. And we do have that. So in the market where we were back in 2009, why prices crashed was look at the blue line or purple line. 60% of the transactions were REOs. 10% were short sales. 70% of the sales didn't allow a buyer to move forward and buy a house. That's never happened before. Now, is that a buyer's market? Oh, heck yeah. If you can get past the emotion that you're buying exactly what everyone else is getting rid of, then of course it's a buyer's market. Guess what state has got that problem right now? Florida. If you look at their foreclosure chart, it's off the charts, which is why we're there. Okay? All right. Household formation. We've been really lousy since the Great Recession. And last year we finally had a more normal year. 2005 would be a consistent year. If we went back further, you would see 2 million plus households formation. We haven't had that in a long time. So to have a price boom in real estate, you need household formation. We haven't had it. So Lance, if you thought I was coming out to say negative things, that's not where I'm landing. We haven't used up much of our powder yet. Next. Homeownership rates. I found it interesting what you said about the political. Were we talking about real estate? No. Should we? I think so. I think it's got to become a priority again, and it's not been. We can take the risk of some things in this marketplace that would be completely sensible, and these have been mentioned. We were able to go back to Washington, D.C. and mention 2 of these things to them directly at the invitation of Doug Duncan, again, the chief economist of Fannie Mae. He likes real estate. He likes investors. He gives us some chance to have an audience with some pretty cool people. You know, we discussed a nothing down program. That would make perfect sense in a marketplace where the payment is less than rent, if it's combined with another thing called a simple assumption. You have to have some gray hair, but simple assumptions used to exist, where you didn't fill out assumption paperwork, the loan had to be current to transfer, and the transfer cost 45 bucks. And it went from A owner to B owner, and that was the end of that. So if you created a nothing down loan program and it started to create a foreclosure, how many people would walk into that and take it over? Would you have a trouble selling that property? There's no way. It would solve itself, and you'd get a lot more people involved. And I think we want this home ownership number to go up, not down. Because what happens when you get a chance to get a mortgage rate at 3 or 4% is that you lock in your housing costs for a long time. And eventually your earnings go up, and that house payment starts looking like a car payment, and you have spendable money. How many of you guys have rentals? How many of you would give me a 30-year fixed rental rate? See, we laugh at that because that's not why we own rentals. We own rentals because every year we're going to check and go, can I bump this thing 100 bucks? And if we can, we do. What's the difference going to be at the end of 30 years from somebody renting and somebody owning? Is going to be huge. And so to get somebody to own something, give them a shot. And if it doesn't work, let it transfer. That makes perfect sense to me. Okay. Signs you're peaking in price. So those are all the elements that say these are necessary. Now this is the math part of it. New home prices and existing home prices cross in price. Oddly enough, and this is what I spend my time doing, looking at charts, is that when you had a 1989, your existing home price actually crossed over your new home price. It happened again in 05. Right now the spread is about as big as it's ever been. What that tells me is if this chart is going to hold true, we have to have existing prices rise to that yellow line before we're done. It also means that most of the rise in price is going to happen in existing homes, not in new homes, because look at the new home price. It's already past the other peak, but the existing home price isn't. So that's what mathematically, to me, has to occur. affordability, we're at about 29% affordability, and historically, I don't get concerned until we hit something around 17. 17% affordability is a point where people want the product really bad. I want you to think back, because part of this is going to be brought up today maybe about affordability. California has affordability crisis, okay? I'm so tired of hearing that, okay? How many of you sold real estate in 04 and 05? Was it hard to sell a house? Affordability was really low, and I know the lenders it didn't matter to them, but people wanted them really bad, the houses. The human being wants something as prices go up. That's our nature, okay? If you're a stockbroker, when stocks are going up, it's a lot easier to sell than when they're down and they're flat on their back. It's just human nature. We want to participate. In 1988 and 89, same thing. If you're selling real estate, you have no trouble selling anything. Multiple offers, affordability is down. So right now we're 29%. Yeah, that's nowhere close to 17. To me, we're in a safe zone as far as that goes. Go ahead, Aaron. The U.S. to median price, there's a ratio that we've reached before, and it was 250% at the peak of the market last time, and we're over 200% now. That's, I'd say, a little concerning. We were 200% in 1989. So as far as that ratio go, you know, that's a little bit of a concern. Next chart. California median household income to California median price. So you take the median income, give it a multiplier to get to our median price. So we're at over 7. We got to 10 during the crazy years. In 1989, when we got to our peak price, we were only at 6%. What was the difference? That multiplier is affected by interest rates, wouldn't you say? Okay. Next chart, interest rates. So here's a really good question. What are interest rates going to do for the next 2 or 3 years? It'd be really interesting to get that take from everybody. How many people think they're going to go up? Okay. How many people think they're going to go down? My guess is that you'll see an interest rate start with a 2 before we're done. Somebody finally made a note. Okay, that was the one that did it. By the way, does low interest rates always coincide with a great real estate market? No. It's because you're getting there because your economy stinks so bad. So what's interesting is we may have some pockets of really interesting times. Would you think refi business would be good the next 2 or 3 years? Like every loan in America would refi? Okay, so that'd be a booming business. Your PITI payment would be very reasonable. Our biggest problem is where do we go from there? How do we have a 6% mortgage rate? By the way, for most of us in the room, 6% is a pretty cool rate. I refinanced a house at 17.5 to become an investor. 17.5. And so, you know, when I think about interest rates now, it's crazy. I would have never thought we'd see interest rates where they are. But it's interesting, I did a boot camp a few weeks ago, and I was reading stuff on my own. I started really contemplating, and I called a friend of mine that's smart, and I said, you know, I got to run something by you. I said, I really think we're going to see an interest rate that starts with a 2. And he said, funny you should say that. He said, a really smart guy that I know just sent me this, and he forwarded it to me, and it was his rationale for the same conclusion. And that doesn't mean it's going to happen. So, you know, you don't walk out here and say, hey, you know what, it's going to be 2% mortgage rate. But you know what the hottest selling commodity or article is in Japan right now? A home safe. And why is that? Because they're charging you to have money in the bank. You don't get interest, you get charged money. That phenomenon is spreading. It's going other places. It's very difficult to have a 10-year T-bill reach 3 or 4% when everyone else's 10-year is 0.5. That spread is probably not going to be allowed to occur. So it wouldn't surprise me that you saw a 1% 10-year T-bill somewhere in the future. It doesn't have to happen this year, but I'm saying that spread probably can't be allowed to occur. And so it'll be very interesting. both short-term and long-term, what's going to go on with this. I haven't extrapolated those numbers. I just honestly, I just thought I'd mention it today because you might hear some very other different things, and you know what? They may be right. But that's just my point of view. I looked at it and I thought, you know what? That just may happen. Sorry. I'm kind of done, but I would be open for questions. Are we too early?
No, you're perfect. You're perfect.
Perfect? Okay.
You just got here 30 seconds ago. Now you're okay. Otherwise, you would have had to tap in. But let's do some questions while we're queuing up. Excuse me, yes, please. Let's do some questions for Bruce. Let me grab one of these mics. Raise your hand if you got a question or two. Greg, want to help me out with this? Okay. While we're getting this queued up, let's talk a little bit more. I stepped out apparently when you said your 2% interest rate thing.
Well, I'm sorry you missed it.
Drew comes over and says, "Just missed the deal." So, who's surprised to hear that Bruce is talking sub 3% interest rates? There's actually a couple lenders that are raising their hand. I remember last year, if I go back and I play the tape, I think we all were thinking that interest rates were going to be maybe north of 5 by the end of this year, except for you.
Right, I was going to say, I did not participate in that.
They were lower than where they were in March of last year. We are, I think, lower than we were in March of last year. We're darn close.
Yeah, and that 2% may not happen this year, but I think in the next 2 to 3 years, that's going to be what occurs.
Wow, wouldn't that be something? If we can't sell the houses at sub 4%,
well,
why can we sell them at sub 3%?
See, you can't go there. I'm not saying it's going to create a great real estate market, because the only reason you would have a 2% mortgage rate is it really is lousy. Right. So that doesn't automatically, I've got to do a lot of research. I've already pulled up a lot of things about Japan. Japan has an interest rate of 1.4% for their mortgage rate. And I need to look at their chart and see what happened to their real estate. It's probably not positive because their demographics are so bad. So you can have a 1% mortgage rate and have a lousy real estate market. So I'm not saying it extrapolates to a great real estate market. It does extrapolate to a low payment, right? And so, I mean, we all can connect with that. But whether it starts all these other positive things, I haven't concluded that.
Hi, Bruce. Do you think that, based on everything you're saying, do you think that the prices are going to reach what they were in 05, 06?
You know, you already have places where that's occurred and beyond. And so part of it, unfortunately, was driven by foreign investors. Some of it's driven by tech companies doing really well, and so you have an amazing amount of money show up in an area. So San Francisco, the top price in 06 was $950, and now it's $1,350,000. And I speak up there. I'm going up there this afternoon. They think that's perfectly reasonable, but it's driven by other things. So do I think we're going to get there? I'm not sure. I think you need lenders' help. I think the lending world has to change and want to make real estate a priority. And if the politicians don't want to make ownership a priority, then I don't know that we'll get there.
Okay, but just so you know, Bruce is not going to be able to, you're not sticking around for the Q&A, you got to get on the plane, right?
Right.
Bruce is not going to be here for the Q&A at the end, so now's your chance.
So Bruce, you're not really saying whether you think prices on housing is going to go up or down.
No, but I'd be happy to say something about that. I don't think it's going to be phenomenal either way. I don't see a downside. I definitely don't see a downside. If I was in your position, would I think I would be doing somebody a favor by selling them a home with a fixed rate mortgage that starts with a 3? The answer is yes. Because historically, that's the deal, if you will. And that doesn't, if we go down to 2 something, it doesn't make 3 not a deal. It was 17.5. Okay, and it was 10, and it was 8, and it was 6. 3 something is ridiculous. 2 would be absurd. So if we get there, we get there. But still, if I'm in your industry, don't forget how powerful it is to own a house. I wrote a report in 06, the crash. said the prices could go down by 50%. Did I sell my own residence? No. I know it's going to go down by 500 grand, and I don't sell it. And here's why. I tried to be a renter for about a minute. I called a guy that had a really cool house, and I said, I'm not your typical renter, I'll pay you a year in advance. And he said, do you mind if I ask you a question? I said, no, what is it? He says, do you have any pets? And there was a pause, and all of a sudden I realized why I was a homeowner. I didn't want anyone to have the right to ask me that question.
Yeah.
Ever. Doesn't that feel cool? When you have any darn pet you want and paint the purple, whatever. I like that. I don't want to give that up for 500 grand, and I didn't. I found out that day what I felt when I was 20. I remember mowing my own grass for the first time when I was 20, and it was the first day I felt like a man. I had my name on a grant deed. I didn't have a dime worth of equity, but I owned something, and it was very powerful to me. Yes?
If you predict the standing loan rate is going to be in the 2s, maybe somewhere above 2, but below 3, what's that going to say about demand? Because the X generation and subsequents, they're being predicted as seeing the housing crash in 06 and relegating themselves to accepting renting and spending rather than investing all of their assets to purchase a home.
Well, I think when you say investing all of their assets to purchase a home, you have down payments that are 3%. What they have to decide is the PITI payment is going to be stable and their rent isn't. They're going to get sick of being a renter here. And the millennial generation, too, is going to create households. They're not going to be 50 and living in the back room. They're not. Okay? They're maturing or doing what we think about being an adult. They're going to get married and have kids eventually. Well, that's going to create some demand. That's going to create household formation. It's delayed. It's not like it's not going to happen. Well, that delay is a lot of numbers. So I think that could be a very positive thing. I don't know. I haven't done the math yet with what I think could happen in price. I know you can have rising affordability in a lousy market. So you got 2% affordability doesn't mean you're going to have a great real estate market. It means you'll have an affordable one. But I also try to point out, there's no way you're going to have a lot of foreclosures right now in the next few years. There's no way. We don't have the elements that are necessary. We haven't let a bunch of people in with nothing down that can't really qualify and pretend they did. So that group's out. Normally, we're building enough homes where when the downturn happens, builders' homes that are unsold are 15% of the entire market, and they all want to get sold tomorrow. So they get put on sale. And if you're one of those people that bought that new home in the last year, you're upside down instantly. Right at the beginning of 2016, we started the year with unsold new builder homes being 1.5% of the inventory, not 15. There's no way that's a big problem.
Just real quick on the fourth. By the way, we have time for about 2 more questions. So I've already got one over here. Or actually, I got 2 right here. So we'll see how long Bruce's answers are. On the foreclosure side, though, again, I was at the RealMap conference, like I mentioned earlier this morning. Back at the peak, there was 3,000-4,000 at this conference in Palm Desert. There maybe was 250, 300. They told me 300 people registered, so it was probably 250 people there. And pretty much everyone to a person was not expecting anything on the foreclosure front. Nothing at all.
To be fair, if you had that interview in 2006, you would have got the same answer. You would have had a crowd of 30 and everybody saying it was going to be great. So,
well, except for Chris Thronberg. So, yeah.
No,
that's
well,
I met Chris actually. And he said, "Yeah, you guys think it's great, but be ready. It's not going to be so great." So, but very interesting. Okay, I got a question for you here.
Bruce, how do you feel about picking up long-term, solid rentals with equity?
perfect. That's a great long-term, especially with the interest rates being reasonable. It's not just the establishment, Fannie, Freddie allowing you to have 10 houses. There's a lot of financing that's come out of the woodwork for investors that's pretty good. So that's one place that's gotten actually more generous financing than the owner-occupant. It's gotten a lot of attention.
Yes, good morning, Bruce. On the economy, with the beginning of the year, we realized realized, I think 2 or 3 corrections already equaling 10%. Historically, when that happens, we have a calamity in the economy. What's your opinion with those corrections in the market and any future challenges?
You talking about the stock market?
Yes.
Okay. I don't see a calamity. I see low GDP growth, not just in our country, worldwide, and that's basically the bigger picture to me is going the other way. You don't have 0% interest rates thinking you're going to trying to prevent inflation. To me, you have 0% interest rates trying to prevent deflation. That to me seems where the emphasis is. I don't know if we're going to join that, but I would say the odds are to me more in favor of that in the next 2 or 3 years than it's against it. So I don't know if we're going to have another big recession. I don't. In California, I don't know. A lot of the big drivers that cause that, you lose all your construction jobs. We never got them back. There's no place to take them from. So the calamity is not in my vocabulary. I think 2016 is going to be a decent year for real estate. If I was buying a property, I wouldn't expect, okay, I'm buying this because it's going to accelerate quite a bit. Although historically, the charts that are in place allows that to occur. Okay, affordability, job, unemployment, all those things that are in place, low foreclosures. Normally, we're accelerating in price with these charts, and we're not. And so the real reason is not because affordability is at 29%, it's because lenders are saying no to tons of people they used to say yes to.
Okay, we got the last question from the audience, and then I'm going to take the last one from me.
Thank you. I actually have 2 questions for you. On the new construction, is it strictly residential or commercial as well? That impact?
Single family.
Single family.
Yeah, you have tremendous industrial construction, and you have probably still very poor office construction.
Thank you. And then my second question is, with all the parameters you gave us on what is affecting the marketplace, what do you see as the top 2 or 3 to be watching for interest rates to drop?
GDP growth would be, the thing that I would pay attention to. Low fuel prices actually is, when we did a chapter on inflation in one of our reports and really connected inflation to the price of oil. I didn't ever think I would be connecting deflation to the price of oil, to be honest with you, but that has a big impact. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens to oil.
Okay, now I'm going to take the last one, and we've already got Dr. Husing's PowerPoint up, so hopefully maybe you can do this off memory. Affordability.
Yes.
I know your number is somewhere to get concerned around 17, 18%.
Right.
I don't know about concerned is the right word, but...
No, that would be an exit.
Okay, and right now we're about...
29.
29, and last year we were...
About 29.
29, okay. So has there ever been a time on the chart that shows that where the affordability kind of started to go down, didn't hit 17 or 18, but then it kind of went back up? So in other words, no. So we don't see the correction up and then it goes down. So it's either going up or it's going down.
It's getting driven by price increases. See, normally what happens when you have a California price run, like from 85 to 89, prices accelerated, took out affordability at 89, and you were done. 2000 to 2006, we actually went lower than affordability than 17 because we had this nonsense financing, but that affordability went straight down because prices went straight up. This time, prices went up, and then all of a sudden they've plateaued somewhat, and affordability has just stayed there. So if you're saying, is this a first? The answer is yes. And so you have to then go ask the question. It's not because 29 affordability is a low affordability number. Something has changed. What's changed? You're saying no. You used to say yes to 45% of the people under 619, and now you're saying it represents 5% of your business instead of 45. Now, I'm not saying it should return to 45, but it probably should return to more than 5.
Okay, but so if the charts hold true to the past, then affordability will continue to go down, basically prices going up, before the reverse.
No, unfortunately, that's yes. Historically, that's exactly what happens. But the lending arm is broke. So could you end up with affordability being peaked out at a different number? than 17? Sure. If you say no to enough people, you could have, what if we could say, okay, the minimum FICO score is 800. How would the lending business do that? I mean, at some point, you're saying no to so many people, so I'm being ridiculous right now. So you're aware of the trends. Are the trends more lenient or status quo?
We got a bunch of lenders here in the office. Are we getting more lenient, status quo? Raise your hand if things are loosening up a little bit. I got 3 of you.
Say one more time? 620 FICO? Okay. Okay, what's interesting, what you just said, this whole chart that we showed, 619 and under represented 45% of the business, and you're not even there. So all those people, I'm not saying we should get back to 2005 idea of standards, but I'm just saying that's the difference, is that we're not allowing people in that would normally get a yes answer. Self-employed people, anyway.
Well, let's just ask the final question to the lender. Raise your hand if you are in the lending business in the room. Okay, leave your hand up. Okay. Leave your hand up if you think that the lending practices at your institution are getting looser. Okay. All right. Okay, just put your hand up if you think they're basically unchanged. You haven't seen any changes. Okay, who says they're getting tighter? None. Okay, so it's either unchanged or who's in the corner over here where things are getting loose? Just a little bit looser. Okay. All right. Hey, Bruce, thank you so much. Everybody put your hands up.
Thank you. Given the business that you are all in, I suspect you need to have some idea what the overall economy in the Inland Empire is doing that, in a sense, drives your business. To really start at that, the first thing that I always like to look at is what is going on in the United States. So you see here the picture of job growth month by month in the United States. You see 2 recessions there. The recession of the early part of the last decade when you had the dot-com implosion, and then the Great Recession, of course, of 2008 through 2010. In that period, we lost, as a country, 8.71 million jobs, a huge decline. Now, what has happened once we start going up? Well, first of all, you see some really high bars going way up. Don't get excited. That was hiring census workers. Then you see 4 negative bars. That's laying them back off. But from then on, you see growth over a very long period of time. Altogether, we've added back now 13.8 million jobs during that period of growth. It has been slow. On the other hand, slow isn't necessarily bad, because it generally means we haven't started doing something really stupid. Because really stupid is when the thing gets cranked up too rapidly. And so that period of time, we are now 5.1 million jobs higher than we've ever been as a country. We're at a record level at this point. Now, there's some other metrics that are important to the Inland Empire economy from the national economy. First of all, oil prices. As you just heard a minute ago, oil prices incredibly low. We are a relatively poor area. Very large numbers of families here spend all of their income. When you lower the price of petroleum, which isn't just in gasoline, it's in food, it's in all the plastics. Oil is in a lot of stuff. When you lower that, you effectively increase the buying power of poorer families, which is a help to the Inland Empire. Then you have my favorite change. This is the U.S. economy right now, again, is the strongest economy in the world. This is the value of the dollar. That red line is 100. Think of it as a ruler. So back in 2000, we were right at 100, then it went up over that, then it came way down. And by 2 years ago, where we were was down here. So it had come down quite a long amount. Now we're there. So how much has it gone up between 2012, 2013, and today? And the answer is 28%. Now, so what? Well, I drink an enormous amount of very good wine. This is a bottle of Montrachet. I have been trying to convince my wife to let me have one of these for years. It is a French Burgundy. That bottle 2 years ago cost $4,000. Now, because the value of the dollar is so much stronger, what has happened is it only costs $28.78 for that bottle. So I went to my wife, who had turned me down at $4,000, and said, "What about now?" Well, you know what the answer was. But the point of this is this fact. Everything we buy from countries outside the United States is effectively cheaper by roughly 28% on the average. That's because the currency has shifted. Now, so how does that affect the Inland Empire? What do we do for a living around here? We handle imports, huge volumes. And the result of that chart is imports will at least stay the same if they don't go up, and they probably will go up. Now, if you're in manufacturing, you hate this chart. Why? Because everything you sell offshore is 28 more expensive to your customers, even if you haven't changed your price. In fact, you're really worried about imports coming in and competing against you in this country. So for an area that specializes in imports, this chart is in effect good news. Also, if you happen to be a consumer of fine French wine. Now, another thing that's important is also measured on a scale of 100, and this is consumer confidence. If you look way over on the left on a scale of 100, back in 2009, our confidence level at the current time in 2009 was down at 21. That means we were in a universal depression. Now, you can see it go up and fall off, go up and fall off, go up and fall off. All the way on the way up, it goes up and falls off. But it continues the general trend of up. Why does it keep falling off? And this is a serious answer. Congress kept going in session. And every time they went in session, they did something incredibly stupid. And the result was they scared the country and consumer confidence went down. When you're listening to Fox or when you're listening to MSNBC or CNN and you hear all of those politicians talking, ignore them. What they have to say has got nothing to do with the reality that you and I have to live in. I say that as a former professional campaign manager. The fact is now, though, consumer confidence is way over 100. And so we are feeling pretty good right now. Not everyone, and less so in an area like ours, but as a country, we're feeling more confident. And that is always good news. And this is one of the things, frankly, needed for home sales. You need confidence. If there's a reason our markets aren't doing well, I would suggest that confidence after the experience of the downturn is relatively low in Southern California when it comes to residential real estate. Then there is the stock market. Was referred to a little bit ago. One of the things economists say is that the stock market has predicted 9 of the last 5 recessions. You hear my point. The fact is that the stock market is a lousy indicator of what the economy is going to do. There are times when it is. Most of the time, or at least half the time, it is not. Now, where are we this particular time? Well, the S&P is back to roughly 2,000. It's back, I think, at that level this morning. So the S&P is sort of moving back up after diving and up and diving and up. I just pulled 250,000 out of the market because I got sick of watching it, quite frankly. But the fact of the matter is this forecasting a recession? I don't think so. I think this is the stock market doing what the stock market does, and it really is detached from the underlying fundamentals of the economy. Then there are interest rates. Specifically, if you look there, we're sitting at barely above 3.5%, and it's right pinned at the lowest level, just slightly above the lowest level we've seen in years. So this should be a help to the real estate market, provided people want to buy houses and provided lenders are willing to lend. So the market is, in fact, very low interest rates. You could see they started to go up and then they've come back down again. Now, that's sort of the U.S. picture. For our economy, it is generally good news. It's not perfect news, but it's generally good news across all of these various metrics. Switching then to the state of California. This is the total number of jobs in our state. You will note that back in 1999, we were at 14.5 million jobs. We then went up to almost 16 million and then back down to roughly 14,500,000 jobs. So between 1999 and 2009, we lost every job created in between. That's what happened in the recession. It has now gone up, and where we sit is just below 16,500,000 jobs, an all-time record. If we look at how we got there, in 2007 we had 15.8 million jobs. Sorry, clicking too fast here. Here we go. We then lost 1.178 million jobs in the state. So we peeled off a lot of work. Then we had the recovery where we lost 1.17, we gained back over 1.8. So we now sit at 16,474, an all-time record, and we are 630,000 jobs higher than we'd ever been before. That is compared to the 07 record that we used to have. Now, so again, a relatively good state environment. Now coming down to the Inland Empire, what do we see? This is the picture. Now, I started studying the Inland Empire. One or two of you was born. I started studying this region when I did my PhD work at Claremont in 1964. That was 52 years ago. So I've watched it, I've basically lived its changes. And what you see here, those blue bars are all job growth. If you go to when I started working on it, which would be over about here, all the bars were blue. We never had a job loss. The closest we came was in the early 1990s during the aerospace defense cutbacks, and we still added some work during that period of time. So we have been unusual until 08. 08, 09, and 10 were disasters. Altogether, in that period of time, we lost 10.8% of all of our jobs, which was 140,850 jobs peeled off. Now, we've since been growing. And you see there a little bit of growth in 2012, quite a bit more in 2013 and 14. There is 2015. We just got the revised numbers. We added over 56,000 jobs last year. That's a big jump. What about next year? Well, this is when I put on my tall conical-shaped hat, get out my dartboard, close my eyes, and throw a dart, and then charge people large fees to hear where it landed. I'm coming in this next year, again, so far in 2011 to 2015, we lost 140. We gained back 196,000. So we've gained back more than we lost. We're now 56,000 jobs out of the hole. So we're no longer in recovery. We're now in expansion mode. And I take a look at next year, and what I see, it's going to be just short of 50,000. That's the lower end of the forecast that I'm working on. So you can see that would give us 4 really strong years in a row, giving us over 200,000 jobs over those 4 years. It put us up roughly 100,000 out of the hole. So we're looking pretty darn good. All right, what's it doing? There we go. Now, job quality is without a question an issue for the Inland Empire. These are the high-end jobs in the state on the left, 17.8%. Our area, private sector, 2.1%. So very weak in high-end. Now, why? Quite frankly, because of the quality of the labor force of the Inland Empire. It is very tough to draw high-paying, high-end companies into an area with a very, very poor quality of the labor force, and that is unfortunately what we have, and I'll show you some data in that in a minute. That's the downside news. Now, the upside news. In office moderate paying work, this is $45,000 to $55,000 a year. School teachers, people working in medical care, health care in general, people working in real estate like your folks here. 13% of the state, for us, 16.3. So a bigger share there than the state. But that's not the real difference. The real difference is here, blue collar. In the state of California, it's 20.7% of job growth between 2011 and 2015. So that's during the recovery. The state share of its growth was only 20% in blue-collar technical sectors. For us, it's 38%, almost double. Now, there's 2 things going on here. One, we have competitive advantages for blue-collar work in the Inland Empire, particularly on a cost basis. We also have an environment where the power structure tends to agree to allow that sort of work to come here. In the state of California, we have put environmental policies in place that, quite frankly, are saying to manufacturing, to logistics, to construction, we don't want you to grow. And you can see the lack in the state as a consequence of that 20.7%. The overall result of this is a shock, is a surprise. The low-end share of jobs. State of California, 48% of the jobs are in sectors at 30,000 and below. In the Inland Empire, it's, I can't read my own number, wait a minute. What's it say? 42, 48, 42. What's that tell you? Overall, our job mix is better than the state because the state has essentially eliminated blue-collar work because of its environmental policies. Who does that affect? The poorest among us, the people who need blue-collar jobs to get to the middle class. As a former Democratic campaign manager who put 5 members in the state legislature when Willie Brown was Speaker, I have to tell you that particular chart disgusts me. because it basically says the leadership, starting with the governor and on down, of the Democratic Party is moving away from the base of their own party in terms of caring about them. It's a shock when you see those numbers. Now, second surprise, job growth last year. LA County, 84,950. Inland Empire, 58,692. Who's third? San Francisco. With all due respect, the world does not revolve around San Francisco Bay, contrary to what people in Sacramento tend to think. Who's next? Orange County at 46. Then who? Silicon Valley. So we added more jobs than either the San Francisco Bay Peninsula, that's Marin, San Francisco, San Mateo, or Santa Clara County and its environs. So we have gotten back to what we used to be, the state's job engine other than LA County. So we look very, very good on that metric. And our unemployment rate is falling. You can see on the left that the unemployment rate of the Inland Empire and the nation were roughly the same. Excuse me. Then we get into the recession, and that blue line shows that we're almost 5% higher than the national unemployment rate. Then what happens? Well, slowly the national level has come down, and more rapidly our level has come down. These are unadjusted data for both the U.S. and for ours. We don't seasonally adjust ours, so this is the unadjusted for the U.S. 5.8 for us, 5.3 for the country. We're within 0.5% of the national level. So it's getting back closer to normal. Does that mean unemployment is not a problem at all? No, it doesn't. There are still people who are in jobs that are part-time that they'd rather not be in, but the fact is the picture has brightened dramatically. Now, the major issue in the Inland Empire, without question, is in fact poverty. When you look at people under the age of 18, 25.4% of our children are living in poverty. You can see that that's less than LA County. It's a lot less than the Central Valley. Then when you look at the full population, we're at 18.2, a little less than LA, and then you see 24.5 in the Central Valley. Now, one of the weird questions is, why is it that the inland counties are so much generally poorer than the coastal counties? And I would suggest one of the answers has to do with the California Environmental Quality Act. If you want to build a housing tract anywhere in the coastal counties, you're going to put in your bid to get it done, you're going to put it in the process, and then you're going to start getting sued, and sued, and sued. Actually, it's not CEQA anymore. What it is the California, let's see how long we can hold them up before they run out of money act. But what that has meant is that supply isn't increasing in the coastal counties. Well, if you don't increase supply as demand moves along, mostly because of births over deaths, we just have a growing population, prices go up, and you basically force the marginally educated who are poorer or less well off to migrate inland if they want to own a house. And so you end up with these kind of metrics, and one of the causes is CEQA. I've become independent. I now hate everybody. The other challenge we have, of course, in a region like ours is the just sheer diversity of population. Hispanics, 49% in the Inland Empire. It's over half in San Bernardino County, just under it in Riverside, versus 43, 42 in the coastal, in the rest of the Southern California. The white Anglo population is identical, 33.9 in both cases. African American, 6.8 in the inland counties. It's 5.8 in the coastal counties. The other big difference is Asian. And so we have 6.7, the coastal counties are at 14.2. And that's a large group that's beginning to affect a lot. You're really seeing it here, places like East Vale, Chino Hills, Rancho Cucamonga, those types of communities where that population is starting to migrate inland. Now there's always a test, and this is how it works. You need to understand exactly how an economy operates. It is not because there's a lot of retail. It operates because there are certain sectors that bring money to the region, and once it gets there, it starts moving through. Now what brings us? Well, think of a gold mine in the Old West. What happens? They dig up gold. What do they do with it? They ship it away. What's that do? It brings money to a place that until then had no economy. Now what do the miners need? Well, they need food and tools. So you end up with a general store. They need entertainment. So you have the saloon. Now miners have other needs. However, we will skip that part of the discussion. My wife has told me she's going to divorce me if I don't get that out of there. On the other hand, I used to run a casino in Nevada in the cow counties where prostitution was legal. You'd imagine a former prostitute, Jesus. Excuse me, a former college professor having to sit down with the town madam and work out my marketing plan. Okay, now what are the gold mines here? Number one is sophisticated warehousing. This is the most sophisticated warehouse region of the United States. Second, medical care. Not just medical, all levels of health care. Third, construction. Hasn't been a lot of residential, it's mostly been infrastructure as well as large facilities for industrial facilities. Manufacturing is still a part of our economy that's grown somewhat. And then finally, we've got a little bit of high technology, not very much. That's our big downside, as I said earlier on. And that gives you the sophisticated secondary tier. On the left, consumer services. On the right, retailing, as the money moves its way through our economy. So let's look at the things in the left corner. Before we do that, though, we have to remember this fact. Look at the share of our adult population that has a high school diploma or less, no college whatsoever. 45.7 in Riverside, 47.1 in San Bernardino. So approaching 50% of the population honestly is not qualified to work in an advanced economy as we're going forward. This is frightening. And it is why we tend to need the blue collar where the high end doesn't tend to come to us. Now, healthcare. Let's look at that one first. Healthcare was 12% of our job growth as we started to recover and then expand from 2011 to 2015. It's a good paying sector. 54,000 is the median. Half make more, half make less. Huge share of these jobs are not doctors and nurses. Huge share of these people are technicians. If you've been to the doctor lately, MRIs, EKGs, all that stuff, you aren't talking to nurses or doctors, you're talking to techs. This is a sector that's going to grow. It's the one thing that is helping the office sector because medical is expanding and needing office places to locate. We have 26.6% more workers, more people per worker, 26.6% more people per worker than the California average. So we're way understaffed. This is a sector that has to continue growing, given our population, given the Affordable Care Act. All of these things which drive demand should in fact lead us to expansions in the whole healthcare field. Then there is the sophisticated warehousing operations, the big buildings around here. The starting point here, as I indicated earlier, is imports. You can see the peak was 8.2 million 20-foot equivalent containers coming into the ports of LA and Long Beach. That's how we measure it. We look at the containers and we convert it to 20-foot equivalents and we ask how many. 8.2 million was the peak. Then it dropped off to 8, collapsed to 6 with the recession. It's now back to 7, 8 for the last 2 years in a row. And that 7, 8 last year included a disastrous January with labor unrest at the ports. So and this is a value of the dollar is affecting these numbers. On the bottom you have exports, which is what we don't specialize in. And you can see the yellow bars go up to a peak, but they fall off. That's the value of the dollar affecting exports on the other side. Now, question for the audience. Who in here did not buy something for Christmas online last December? Raise your hands. Oh, you have a whole bunch of you. You all lose your American citizenship. The fact is, we'll just face it, we're changing what we do. If you've ever followed a millennial around in a store, you see them with their cell phone, or they're looking at what the prices are, and they're figuring out where they can buy it online cheaper. Now, there is an effect of that. And the effect is, whether it's an Amazon or a Home Depot, fulfillment warehousing to supply that stuff is now replacing the kinds of shopping centers we used to have. These facilities are 750,000 to over 1 million square feet. A 1 million square foot facility takes 52 acres of flat land with setbacks. So our area has an advantage for this because we still do have some land left. We're the only area in Southern California where that's the case. So this is the other thing driving the logistics economy. How fast is it growing? 15% compounded consistently since the end of the recession. How would you like your 401k to go up 15% every year, just automatically? That's how fast it's growing. So this is what's happening to the absorption of industrial facilities in the Inland Empire. It was around 12.5 million, one little peak in there back in the early 90s. Went all the way up to 48 million square feet in 1 year back, or a couple of year period of time there around 2001. That's the China trade really starting to affect us. Then it starts to come down as we run out of room. The vacancy rate plunged, and so it couldn't grow so fast. Hit an equilibrium around 20 million square feet. You see the recession, bounces back, falls off somewhat as we run out of space again. Now we're building again, and we're back to 23.1 million square feet were absorbed in the last year. Now we have a project that you may have heard about called the World Logistics Center in Moreno Valley. 41 million square feet. That's less than 2 years worth of our normal absorption in this area. That's how fast we're chewing up industrial space with companies moving in and bringing employment along with them. Interestingly enough, in December, we had 20.7 million square feet of space under construction. So there's not a perfect equilibrium, but there's a close relationship. Build it, fill it, build it, fill it, build it, fill it here in the Inland Empire. And particularly with e-commerce expanding, there doesn't seem like a place where this is going to stop. There's that 20.6 million square feet in the Inland Empire. It is 80.1% of all industrial construction in Southern California. Who's second? Who cares? It happens to be LA County, and we've got 10 times as much space as LA County under construction. So this game is here. It isn't anywhere else. So our vacancy rate is all the way down into the low 3s now because we're filling it faster than we're building it. And as a consequence of that, the lease rates are almost back to their record level that existed before the recession. They're very close, as you can see there. Now, this sector isn't just important to the Inland Empire economy, it is overwhelmingly important. Why? 23% of our direct job growth between 2011 and 2015. Almost 1 out of every 4 jobs directly, and remember, those jobs support other jobs when the money goes home and then gets spent at Stater Brothers or wherever. So this is a powerhouse. We have groups within this region that want to shut this sector down. And quite frankly, what they're basically saying is you want to shut down this economy, because this is the powerhouse. Middle income, half make more than $45,877, half make less. These are official data from the state of California Employment Development Department. Actually, there are 155 occupations in logistics. 83% of the workers in that sector have a high school or less education. That's the kind of occupations they're in. So 33% of those folks are making over this level. That's just the way the math works. The people who don't like this sector hate those numbers, so they keep inventing new ones. Personally, I prefer to go with the official state data. But as a result of this, we're seeing assessed valuations start to come back, permits start to come back. We still are pretty weak. And that's because residential hasn't been a major part. One of the key things here is the whole question of air pollution. Back in 2001, 120.2 days was the number of days the worst spot in the region, which is Rubidoux, Riverside, was over the federal standard for air quality, PM 2.5, which is the particulate matter that comes out of diesel engines. Where was it in 2014? Most recent numbers available, 5.3. Now, how the hell did it get from 120 to 5.3 when you added 240 million additional square feet of occupied space with trucks bringing goods to them? And the answer is technology. The technology of the engines is evolving and fixing up a lot of this. Those of us who are a little worried about, not a little worried, a lot worried about the attempts by the regulators to stop this sector from growing, our worry is it is getting better. The question is speed. Do we really want to kill off a sector that in fact creates the dynamo of the Inland Empire economy? Now then there's manufacturing. Fisker has been renamed to another car, but it's going to be made in Moreno Valley, and this is a competitor to Tesla, and it's going to be manufactured here. So we have manufacturing, but here's our problem. Between January of 2010 and January of 2016, the U.S. created 883,000 manufacturing jobs. California only created 47,000. Why? Because the manufacturers don't want to, 1, grow in California, or 2, if they're not here, come here. Now, who gets hurt by that? If they put their growth in another state, or if they stay in other states and don't come here? And the answer is very simple: the workers, because the jobs they need are not created. Now, the result of state legislation shows up in this chart. We have a 33% requirement for renewable energy at our base. That's California's energy price for industry out there, way out on the right. The next blue bar over is Nevada. If you look at how much higher California is than every western state, what do you see? Compared to Nevada, we're over 43% higher. Now, you're a manufacturer. You going to go to that state with those kind of numbers? Heck no. You will stay here if you can't leave. I have a very good friend that runs a very large steel operation. He's got $2 billion in the ground. He can't leave. But he starts out on January 1st over $50 million in the hole on his energy costs compared to all of his competitors because of that chart. Now that's with 33% renewables. We just put in place a 50% renewable requirement in 15 years. What research was behind that? That was the research. I happened to go up and testify against the bill, and there were people in line who stood at the mic and said, let's make it 80. I almost stood up and said, let's make it 100, shut down the whole damned economy. Excuse me, I get a little upset. Now what do we have here? These are surveys taken of manufacturers, not manufacturers, of executives on the left, and on the right it's of small businesses. And it's, how do you rate California as a place to be? In both cases, 50th. Now, in case you didn't realize this, 50th is not best. Now there's manufacturing. We created over 10,000 manufacturing jobs between 2011 and 2015. That is a quarter of all the manufacturing jobs created in the state. How do they pay? 49, almost 50,000 at the median, half above, half below. Very good sector. We'd like to unshackle it so it could grow more in this state. That doesn't appear to be likely, unfortunately. Then there is your sector. Construction in general, but also real estate. Now what are we seeing? That whole group of sectors down there is notices of default because people are losing their homes or falling behind on their mortgages. You can see they're down right around 1,000. Compared across there, much less than anything we had seen starting back in 2007 before the problem really showed up. So this is not a major issue. Underwater homes have declined dramatically. This is people who couldn't sell their house even if they wanted to because they owed more than the mortgage. So if they sold the house, they'd still have to owe money on the mortgage. It was 54.9. It's now down to 11.4. And this is because prices have come up to a large extent. And so people are in much better shape. This is what's have happened to prices. Inland Empire, middle-priced house, new and existing, sold for $389, dropped to $155. It's back now to $284. It's up 81% from the low. However, it is still 26% below the peak. That question came up a while ago. However, when you look at this, the homes sold in that loop above the blue line, which were essentially from very late 04 through the beginning of 08, which is at the peak in prices, a lot of those homes have already been lost. Those are those tall bars in notices of default and foreclosures. So we really don't need to get back to that peak to be able to get back to what we might call normal. We're probably very close to that right now. My colleague that was talking to you beforehand was referring to the fact that, are we going to get back to those kind of prices again? Probably at some point, but we don't need to have a normal housing market, at least on the price side. Now, what you see here are the middle-priced houses in the Inland Empire 2 counties versus the coastal counties. San Bernardino, middle price, $275. Riverside, $324. Then you jump over to the coastal counties, $514, $526, a little bit over $700,000 in Orange County. What do you save if you move here, is what those yellow bars are about. Versus San Bernardino, $229, $251, $400 and some odd coming over from Orange County. Compared to Riverside, $190, $282, $379. Huge advantage to move inland. Affordability, if you look at affordability by market, we're at 45% affordability in the Inland Empire, which means 55% of people can't afford, 45% can. Best situation in Southern California. LA, 27 and 73. San Diego, 25 and 75. Orange, 21 and 79. Orange is getting very close to that threshold that you heard about a little while ago in terms of getting to the point where the market's a disaster. Are you building new homes in those 3 counties? No, you're not to speak of. I have a good friend that has been trying to build a project for 12 years. He just had his CEQA documents go to the Supreme Court and get thrown out again. That was 58 homes for 58,000 people. Now, what's strange about this, we haven't seen an increase in demand. What you see there is home sales volume is almost a horizontal line. Started to jump a little bit, but then it fell off again in the 4th quarter. These are seasonally adjusted. So we really haven't seen people taking advantage of the positives that should be driving this market. So this is quite unusual in that respect. And it really shows up in these numbers. The yellow bars on here are population growth in the Inland Empire. You can see that it was up well over 100,000 a year. It's dropped down to in the 40,000s. But the domestic migration, which is people moving from the coast inland, so your potential customers moving from the coast, what you see is negative, negative, positive, positive, negative, negative, positive, negative. If we look at that whole period of time, we lost 10,000 people in 8 years, which was 1,280 people a year basically left on average. So this has not corrected yet. And this is a concern in our marketplace. Construction jobs, however, are up to 13% of our market, and they pay very, very well. They're just over 50,000 right now. Now, this number is artificially high because it's a lot of people that are working heavy equipment making major projects. When we get into residential, those numbers will fall somewhat. Assessed valuation is up. It's excuse me. It's 0.8% over the previous high. However, inflation was 8.6, so the reliance on property taxes is still very weak. San Bernardino has done better than Riverside, up 2.8 versus down 0.8. Now there are the higher paying sectors, and this is the last sort of piece of this. What are we seeing here? Well, here we've got really the need for really high-level entrepreneurs. Jack Dangerman, Esri in Redlands, 2,000 high-end programmers, invented the whole geographic information systems business in his garage. Gordon Bourne's Electric over in Riverside, very high-end firm. Then you've got Ahmad Abdel Al-Khatib. I'm going to actually learn to say his name one of these days. Ahmad has started a company where his staff makes $100,000 to $200,000 a year. They're all extremely young, and they have two characteristics. One, they understand programming, and two, they can speak English about it. If you've ever talked to a computer programmer, that is a weird combination. But they make really good money because they can teach people what it is the technology can do for them. And his company is a very large number of firms, of employees now in the Ontario area. Abbott Vascular down in the Temecula area, again, a very high-paying firm. So we have some. Where's the labor force that can do this sort of thing? Well, really it follows housing prices, because the people who can afford the higher-end homes are the people that likely have the better educations. So you see an arc, starting in Rancho, working their way down to Corona, all those houses, 450 to over 500,000. That's where the bulk of that population is well educated. You have a somewhat of a parallel down in Murrieta, Temecula, not quite the same. And then you have a weird one down here in Redlands and Loma Linda, largely because of the fact that we have in Redlands and Loma Linda, ESRI, University of Redlands, Loma Linda University Medical Center. So the yellow bars up here, Redlands, Temecula, this could be Redlands, Loma Linda in terms of their educational level, can compete with the striped bars, which are the coastal counties. Then in blue, you've got the west end of the two counties. And you can see they compete above or Orange and San Diego or just above LA. And then Temecula and Murrieta are on either side of LA County. But this is only 3.6% of our job growth. This is our problem baby. Median pay, over $65,000. This is what's going on in the office space absorption. It's at 482,000 square feet, mildly good, has not come back anything like what we expected. Vacancy rate still sits at 15. Part of the problem we have with this sector is technology. E-commerce is handling a lot of what used to go on in offices. So you don't need as many offices or as much space if people can do everything online. Looking at retail sales, the top half of that chart for a minute, the two counties are up 12.6% in retail, which is good news. You see that inflation was 16, so it's not quite paying the government enough still for their budgets. San Bernardino, it's close, 14.4 versus inflation is 16.1. Riverside, a little weaker. All of these sectors are low paying. They're 44% of our job growth. Their median income is only 28.9. The only role these can play in getting people to the middle class is a secondary wage earner where somebody is working in one of the sectors that's making $45,000 to $55,000. And then we have the weak links, and that's government, which is still way down in terms of employment. So to summarize, what do I see here? Looking ahead. First of all, we've become a job engine again. And this is not just last year, it's the last couple of years. Second, construction is coming back, though residential is still weak. Third, manufacturing, because of the value of the dollar and, frankly, environmental regulation, will be under pressure. Logistics is bound to remain strong unless the regulators can figure out how to kill it. And they're trying. Healthcare should expand even more than it has because we need more people in that field. Office growth is an issue, given the e-commerce changes in terms of the way work is done. Lower paying jobs, a smaller share here than in most areas, which is great news. A shock, surprise. Labor availability may become an issue with the unemployment rate working its way down, but we still have a lot of people working part-time that would like to be full-time. And then finally, in terms of a forecast, I'm looking, I haven't finished my work on this yet, someplace between 3.6 and 4.0, which would be 49,000 to 54,000 jobs next year. It is always a great pleasure to get the opportunity to be here, and I thank you very much.
Welcome, Iddo.
Okay, thank you. Pleasure being here. Thank you for inviting me this morning. It's always great to talk to a lot of great people that are doing a lot in moving our economy and getting our country and our region back into gear. We've been in a long-term sort of recessionary times, but there's a lot of good news. So really, you've heard a lot from John, and John is an economist, probably one of the foremost economists we have in the nation, certainly out in our region, is the top expert. So he gave you a lot of the background and the numbers. What I'll talk about is what does it actually mean to all of us in the world, and what does that mean to industry, logistics, and why logistics is so important. In fact, I think it's beyond important. It's sort of an historic opportunity for our region. I'll explain why. So I'll talk about logistics, what it means for jobs, and how it impacts real estate. If we can move next. So a lot of people think we understand, right? Mark Twain had a saying, he says, it ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble, it's what you know for sure that ain't so. So a lot of people think they understand what logistics does, how it impacts the economy, what it does, but it really isn't what most people think it is. So we all know, we hear about international trade, but we don't exactly know what it means. People think it's because we're buying and selling things from one another. That is true, but that's just a part of it. What's significant about it is you can see back in 2000, it was about $5 trillion globally, but by 2020, it will expand to about $35 trillion, which is a lot. But what does that actually mean to our economy? What does it mean to everything? So international trade, what we call the global economy, plays a very significant role in our US economy. In fact, so significant that will represent 60% of our GDP. In other words, our economy, the US GDP, which is expected to get to about $20 trillion by 2025, 60% of it will relate to exactly what that is. And logistics is the underlying infrastructure that makes that happen. It's sort of like, Wi-Fi or telecommunication is the infrastructure that makes Apple or Amazon exist, right? Or internet, or all those businesses. Without that infrastructure, if we didn't have fiber optics, internet, that infrastructure didn't exist, we couldn't have all the economy we have. So logistics is that type of infrastructure. I won't spend too much of it, but literally 90% of everything that's made in the world is made in 3 clusters today. One is the North American, US, Mexico, Canada. The center is European, headed by Germany, and then we have Asia. But what does that really mean? The reality is that it's impossible. No company masters all the technology and resources to make any single product anymore. And this is your basic laptop. This is how many countries are involved in making your laptop. But if you go down into the subcomponents, you see that tree grows and grows and grows. It literally takes everybody in the world to make a single laptop. Doesn't matter which brand it is. In fact, this is a source map. This is how many places things have to come to and from before a single laptop is made. Before you buy it, most people think it's made in China, it was made in China and you got it. This is how many places it went to and from to actually make it. So what does that mean, right? We know Apple is the largest corporation in the world today, right? About worth $750 billion. And so to make your basic iPhone, they rely on 776 global suppliers. So when people think it's made in China, it's not quite what it is. So they rely on 776 global suppliers, all which rely on logistics to actually make it happen. But it isn't just high tech. This is your basic pair of jeans, the all-American pair of jeans. This is how many countries are involved in doing that. I won't spend too much time on the details, but even your pizza. The olives come from Greece, the olive oil comes from Spain, all kinds of ingredients come from, this is just to make a pizza in the world today. And it's not just small stuff, big airplane, the all-American aircraft company, Boeing. This is how many countries are involved in making major components. But in fact, they rely on 783 million components that come from literally, if you look at the bottom there, almost every country, industrialized country in the world to make the all-American aircraft. It's basically what all means it's impossible to make anything in one country anymore. So what is logistics? Who are logistics companies, right? So we all know Nike. Nike sells about $40 billion a year of athletic wear. right? Some of you know us for building the Skechers building that we list to Skechers, but Nike is the largest. They sell $40 billion a year of athletic wear. How many shoes do you think Nike makes? Anybody knows? They sell $40 billion a year worth of athletic wear. They sell zero. They design it in Portland, in Oregon. They procure raw material manufacturing all over the world, getting to the customer. That's the broader definition of logistics, supply chain. They're basically a big logistics company, veilers, consumer athletic wear. They don't make a single shoe. If you call them up, they say, we're not in the making of the shoe business. We don't make shoes. But we all know Apple. Apple is the largest corporation in the world, right? They sell billions of dollars of products, iPads, iPhones, everything else. How many iPhones or iPads or products do you think Apple makes? Zero. Apple is a big logistics company. They design it in Cupertino, California. They procure raw material manufacturing all over the world. They get it to the customer. That's logistics. In fact, nobody understands the word logistics. If you told somebody I'm in logistics, they say, really, you went to the doctor and you have logistics, what do you have to take for it? It's like a disease. And can I shake your hand? But the reality is, so, you heard some advertising that was done last year by UPS. They're trying to make the word more palatable. They say, we love logistics, but nobody bought into the word. So what you see, if you look at anybody who has an Apple product here, iPhone, it doesn't matter what, if you flip it over, it will say, not made by Apple, manufactured by Apple, assembled by Apple. They say, designed by Apple. When you see the word design, it's a code word. We're a logistics company. But nobody can use the word logistics, so design is what people are using now. But there's several fundamental shifts that are happening in the world that affect us here that cause all that to happen. One is the shift from manufacturing to logistics. The other is from manual to technology skills, which John talked about, which is a critical area for us. And the other is from subtractive to additive manufacturing, which is a very important thing. So what is the shift from manual to technical skills, right? So this was the skills in our economy till now, right? People were welder, they had a good job, they had all kinds of skills. Now, right, people are moving technology, the machine is doing the work. We're moving to technology skills. And what does that mean? If somebody had a welder job at General Motors just a few years back, it was a highly paid job. In some industrial companies, welders got paid as much as management because the product depends on good welds. It took a lot of years of experience to do that. Well, now this is what the welding line looks like at General Motors, right? We're moving technology. And the same thing, this is what manufacturing jobs. Everybody is waiting, right, for manufacturing jobs to come back from China, and we balance the budget, get all the job backs from China, we'll all be good again. What is really the truth? This is what the assembly line looks like at General Motors today, right? And it's not just in manufacturing, healthcare. God forbid if you had a major surgery till now, let's say lung surgery, you need 6 surgeons around the table, and they have to open and keep you all alive, close you up, you spend a year recuperating. Now there's automation, right? There's a Da Vinci machine. We have another company in healthcare. We have hospitals, and we just bought one of these machines. It costs $3 million, but it replaces 6 surgeons, but the outcome are much better. It used to be if you had a lung surgery, you spend about a week in the hospital, and then recuperating for a year. Now there's 3 little incisions. You're in the hospital for 2 days. The third day you go home, next week you're at work. The outcomes are much better as well. But it's affecting McDonald's in Japan had a problem with labor costs. They're trying to sell fast food. So they went to Motorman, a big Japanese automation company, and now they're automating McDonald's. And so pretty soon, somebody told me the other day in a different conference, he said, I just heard that McDonald's announced that in 2017, they're trying out the first fully automated McDonald's in Phoenix. So we'll see what happens there. But the reality is, technology has moved to a point where anything a human can do, technology can do now, the dexterity, which means flipping a hamburger, packing, sending it out. That's low tech today. So we'll see what happens. But it's in everything, right? You guys are too young for it, but just a few years ago to listen to music, you had to go to a record store, look for the record, stand in line, pay a teller, drive home, put it in the machine, listen to music. Well now, right? iTunes, we select the music, pay for the music, listen to it seamlessly, right? So what happened? Every town in America had record stores, right? Every single town. By the way, all those jobs didn't go to China. Just remember that as I tell you the rest of it. But there are jobs. The way the person who's selling you records today is not standing behind a counter behind a cashier. He's actually sitting behind technology at Apple. And in fact, even though you don't see anybody selling you music anymore, Apple has almost 600,000 employees. Remember, without making a single product. Right? So there's a lot of jobs, we just don't see them, but they're technology-driven jobs, which John talks about. It isn't just those. This is an autonomous truck. It's not science fiction. The state of Nevada was the first state to license a fully autonomous truck. You see the driver is ordering his lunch while the car is driving, and you can see here in last year, in May, Nevada gave the license for the first autonomous trucks. And what that means, the skill of a driver will have to go up too, because now instead of just standing behind a wheel, he can do some management functions. So all the skills have to be upgraded, and John rightly so says that's probably our most critical issue to deal with, is getting the skill. So what does that mean to job with all this automation? Are we going to have less jobs? Everybody's job is going to be replaced? Well, the reality is a little different. So this is not a new thing. People think this is a new thing, robotics, automation, something new happened in the world. I remember 100 years ago, before technology on the farm, right, to plow 100 acres, you needed 30 horses, 30 people with a horse and plow. 100 acres took you a week. Then came technology. One guy on a tractor plows 100 acres in a day, right? In 1900, it took, in Minnesota, 20 people 5 days to harvest 10 acres of wheat. Then came technology. One combine harvests 10 acres now in 6.7 seconds. I'm saying it's 6.7 minutes. So what happened to all these people? So back in that day, when you have most people occupied in menial jobs, right? So you went to the store in those days, you went in, and what was your selection? 12 different kind of canned food, 6 different dresses hanging, 4 different pairs of shoes, 4 different iframes. And what happened when you free up people from menial labor, right? And you gain productivity through the tools, which technology, you unleash a lot of amount of creativity and productivity. So when you go to the market today, right? There's not 12 different canned foods. There's 150,000 items. Each one of them has to be conceived, designed, manufactured, marketed, distributed, accounted for, financed, advertised, right? Huge amount of more jobs are created as a result of technology or productivity in the market. And in fact, what creates jobs at the end of the day is enhancements in productivity. I won't spend much time about it, but the same thing now. There's no 6 dresses or 6 different pairs of shoes to choose from. You go to the mall, there's hundreds of thousands. Each one of those items have to be conceived, manufactured. Somebody has to build a manufacturing plant, equipment to manufacture, advertise it, market it, distribute it, sell it, right? Account for it, finance it. Huge amount of more jobs. In fact, we lost about 25 million jobs on the farm in America, but we created about 120 million jobs past that. So technology actually helped us create more jobs, not less jobs. So what's the truth about manufacturing in the United States? Everybody says we don't make anything anymore, right? Everything is made in China. We don't make anything in America. We don't have manufacturing. But what's the truth? We actually manufacture twice as much as we ever did. But we're doing it with about 40% of the labor. So where did all the jobs go? Right? Where did all the manufacturing jobs? Everybody tells you they went to China because of cheap labor, right? But what's the reality? So I'll explain that real quickly. In 1972, the only people who can automate computation, basically use a computer, was the federal government. They have a $100 million computer. It's not very programmable, not very fast, right? Very costly. So if you were industry at the time, let's say General Electric, I know you're way too young for this, but to do calculation, you had to have a slide ruler. So if in 1972, if you're General Electric, compared to a $100 million computer that's not very programmable, not very fast, you hire 500 engineers, you give them slide rulers, you pay them salary, benefit, pension, and healthcare to sit down and do calculations. But what happens when technology gets more and more sophisticated, more advanced, and cheaper, from 50 to 35 to where today your iPhone has more computing power than the entire federal government had in 1972. Right? It doesn't cost $100 million. So you give today, if you're General Electric, you're not hiring 500 engineers, paying salary, pension, and benefits to do calculation. You give one guy a $2,500 laptop, and he does the same calculation. It took literally 100 people a month to do in 1972. So even IBM, when they start selling computers, what did they advertise? That you no longer need, right, to take valuable engineering personnel to do this menial calculation, repetitive calculations. You can use the computer, which replaces 150 extra engineers. Now here's another thing, people totally think that technology somehow replaces lower-end jobs. But in fact, the first jobs that were replaced were high-end jobs. They were engineers. The difference is the higher educated the people, the quicker they adapt to the new opportunities. And so that's why they get the jobs faster. But like you said, computers first replace very highly technical people, right? They didn't replace somebody doing a retail job. So how does that relate to manufacturing in America? So if you're General Motors and you have some guy pick up a tire, put on a hub, and screw 5 bolts all day long, so when a robotic arm costs $25 million, not very programmable, not very fast, right? You're going to hire 500 people on the factory floor, pay salary, pension, and benefits to pick up a tire and put on a hub and screw 5 bolts all day long. But when, right? automation robotics get better and better, more sophisticated, faster and faster and cheaper from 25 to 10 to 7 to 3 to 1.5 to 7 to 250,000, and you can pick up a tire, put on a hub, and screw 5 bolts, all that same action. You're not going to hire 500 people on the factory floor, pay them salary, pension, and benefits, right, to do that job. You're going to have technology do it. So what happened? Over the last 20 years, lost manufacturing jobs to technology and automation at the rate of 2 to 3% a year, which doesn't sound a lot every year, but over 20 years, that's 40 to 60% of the manufacturing labor force has been replaced by technology and automation, not necessarily by China. In fact, this is because this is what our factory looks like today, right? It's a different kind of job, right? It's a different economy. And you could see that. So you could see that from the 70s all the way to 1999, almost to year 2000, manufacturing was pretty steady in America, right, despite China and everything else. And then what happens in 1999? You can see below, it's a graph showing the introduction of automation, robotics into manufacturing. The technology got sophisticated enough and cost-effective enough and it started to get into the workplace. And look what happened in 1999. Exactly there, as automation, robotics get into the market, we see our manufacturing labor pool go down. So we don't manufacture less, we just do it with different skills. And that's important to understand because we went from these skills, from these kind of jobs, to people operating, programming this equipment, maintaining this equipment, and doing that. So, by the way, in logistics, it's the same skill. What happens now is we have parity. See, it's the same equipment, same technology, parallel skills. So if you work in logistics, it's the same jobs that you get in General Motors today and so forth, because to program this automation and robotics are important. And the skills and the jobs are going to be technicians, people who install it, people who maintain it, program it. And this is to John's point, Dr. Husing's point. 80% of the jobs in the next decade, right, will require technical skills. And so technical skills are going about 300% in the market, where conventional, right, they're going 300%, where conventional jobs are actually shrinking. So it isn't that we don't have jobs, we have a big gap, skill gap. There's 9.5 million jobs opening in America, and yet unemployment because we have a big skill gap. We need to close that gap to compete. And in fact, in STEM, which is basically the technology, the skills that you need, the education that you need, the United States is ranked 14th in the world. Guess who number 1 is? China. People think it's all inexpensive labor. In fact, they're producing more people with those skills, and they're the number 1 consumer of automation and robotics in the world. The world average, we're 50% the world average. That's why our region need to get it right, because this is what will enable us to compete. But the good news is that half of all STEM jobs don't require a four-year degree, which means you can get good paying jobs like in logistics without necessarily getting a full college education. So that's the good news. In fact, if you look at the top 20 right professions you can have that don't require college education, transportation logistics is number 1. And the same thing with the 15 best paying jobs for graduate from college. Logistics, supply chain management is number 5. These are good paying in our economy, and we have those type of opportunities in our region here. Even the Wall Street Journal says, what are young people starting today, the highest paying jobs in America? One of them was right on top with computer programs and everything else, supply chain management. In fact, you can go to UC Riverside today and get a PhD in supply chain management. It isn't just a low-end equation. And to John's point, there's a lot of professions in logistics. And these are just some of the titles. We won't go through them. But more importantly, it has upward mobility, right? You can actually go up. And what that means, you can start out with basically a laborer, and you can move into other kind of jobs all the way to management jobs, all within the same industry. Unlike other industry, which kind of dead end, right? It doesn't matter how long you will work in a hospital. You never be promoted to a nurse or a doctor. You have to go to college to get a degree. It doesn't matter how you work in a law firm, you never be promoted to a lawyer, right? You have to go get a degree. In logistics, you can start and actually end up in a high-paying position. In fact, I'm on a board with a fellow that used to, now he's a finance director at UPS, and we're talking about it. He says, look at me, I started as a delivery guy. Now he's a finance director of a $40 billion company. So all of those opportunities are there. I won't spend much time there. But people still tell me, and I'll wrap up in a few minutes here, but Iddo, how can you say we make something in America when everything I go and buy, I go to Walmart, everything is made in China. My clothes made in China, your shoes made in China, your watch made in China, everything is made in China. It finally dawned on me why people think everything is made in China. Because it's true, we import $300 billion of consumer goods from China. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of stuff on the Walmart shelf. But $300 billion is only 2% of our $14.5 trillion US economy. So it's a big number, but it's 2%. You can bring everything back from China, and it really won't make a huge significant impact in our economy. It'll have some impact, but not what people think it is. And the last thing I want to talk about is what John talked about, CICWA and the regulators. So what's the number one reason? Because people do offshore. Why do people go offshore? Most people think it's called cheap labor, right? They can do it cheaper. Some of it is true. But the number one reason is speed to market. And what that means, if you and I, all together, we came up with the iPhone right here, and we were so patriotic, we wanted to do it in America, and even more patriotic, we wanted to do it right here in Riverside County. So the way we start here is we'll go to a city or the county, and we say we need a 2 million square foot facility, like the Sketcher building that we built. And you'll spend 6 months negotiating what you'll study in the environmental impact report, called an NLP. And then you spend 2 years doing an EIR, that's 2.5 years later. You finally be in front of some council, and depending who's loudest, you might get approved or unapproved, but let's say you got approved, well then you get it sued, because under CICWA in California, everybody, any reasonable project gets sued. So now you're spending 2 more years in litigation, 5.5 years later, you finally get your permits, you prevail, you start building it, you spend 2 years, 7.5 years later, we finally have our factory built. Do you know what will happen? In 7.5 years, Samsung will have sold 1 billion units, we'll have no business. So what Apple does and others do, they go to China, they take 776 global supply, they bring the stuff there, assemble it, bring it back to America, and sell the iPhone 7 years faster than if they wanted to do it right here in California. That's why they're going overseas. So it's not cheap labor. $2 to $3, that's the retail price difference on an iPhone if iPhone manufacturing was moved back to America. So it's not because of cheap labor, it's there. In fact, there's another misnomer. The only money spent in China by Apple on assembling the phone is $7. But we have sort of creative accounting that we do with trade, right? We take the value of the product as it departs the last country and enters the United States and assign that value to that country. So we spend $7 assembling an iPhone. It comes to America as a $600 item, and we say we have a trade deficit with China of $600. Not exactly what's going on. And that's why you hear a lot of rhetoric about bringing things back from China, but they're fighting over $7. There's not that much to bring back, right? And it's not, well, this is when I first, that's a picture of me when I first heard about it. That's what the iPhone manufacturing plant in China looks like. It's highly sophisticated advanced manufacturing. It's not a bunch of people for $1 a day making iPhones. It's not exactly the case. But there is manufacturing. If you have low added value goods without a legible component, like making teddy bears, that's in China, and there's a lot of that going on, a lot of manufacturing. But that's not exactly the manufacturing we want to bring back to America, right? For our children to grow up to work in a factory making teddy bears. So, Lance, there's a lot to talk about. I know you have a time constraint.
We do. We're going to hang. Iddo's going to take some questions as well after Dr. Thronberg is done. So,
can I spend 2 minutes just because it's real estate?
Quick 1 minute, and then
I was going to skip forward to something that I think might be interesting to everybody here that we talked about last night. Okay.
got a lot of info.
Yeah, there is a lot of
Literally cram
info. So,
up.
last thing, it'll take 2 minutes, but I think it's valuable that you understand that there's a big shift coming. So we all heard about e-commerce, right? So we know our US economy is a consumer economy. It's a $4 trillion a year of retail goods are sold. And those $4 trillion of retail goods in America are sold through 12 billion square feet of real estate. All the shopping centers in America. So we know e-commerce has got to about 400 billion, almost $500 billion now. That's about 10% of all our retail. But what does that mean? That means that if you had to have sold $400 billion worth of retail goods for brick and mortar retail stores, you would have needed 1.2 billion square feet of retail centers that never got built in the US. Municipalities didn't get the tax base, nobody built them, there was no construction of them, right? So 1.2 billion square feet never got built if you had to sell it conventionally, 400 billion. So this is how we used to go shopping, this is how we shop now. And it's going, right? And this is the infrastructure was required to support the old shopping. This is the infrastructure required to support the new shopping. And if you could see, department store sales have peaked back in 2000, and now they're way down below like almost 15, 20 years ago. And why is this dangerous? Because all our retail is, the formula for retail, right? The model for retail is anchor tenants in a mall, right? We all know that. But if the anchors now, the big anchors in America have razor thin margins and they're almost collapsing, if another 5 to 10% of retail move to the web, they may collapse their margins altogether. And if the anchors fail, the malls fail. And what will happen is you still want to buy things, but the mall is closed. You're going to buy more stuff on the web, which will drive logistics even further. And you can see that there's already 270 malls, regional malls, that close in the United States, all over the United States, mostly in the East Coast. Everything is moving to logistics centers. They are becoming the new retail. Retail is out, but you can see that all the big retailers, including Walmart, that closed 200 stores right now, are down 35% and more, where Amazon, right, which relies on that new paradigm, is growing. So, well, thank you very much, and I'll be happy to answer questions later.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Oh, hello. Are you out there? Can you hear me? We are a little crammed for time here, to say the least. I'm starting about a half hour later than I was supposed to. You think you're optimistic if you think you're getting me off stage here in 40 minutes.
Take as much time as you want.
All right. How to start out? Again, we went from John's speech on kind of what was happening. You heard a lot about the business cycle and interest rates, and then we kind of went into the more futurist changing landscape of manufacturing stuff. All this stuff, I'm going to have to bring you back, if you will, a little bit to the current economy. Look, if you haven't been paying attention, there's been a lot of worries lately. It's funny, I think last year we had almost the same conversation, right? This year it's a different set of things. It's stock market, it's worries about China, it's worries about, I don't know, what else are we worried about nowadays? Everything's falling apart. Yeah, two scariest words in the world, President Trump, right? But the stock market's been all over the place, and the global trade and manufacturing, and every time we pick up the newspaper, there's somebody else telling you, again, another horror story about what's happening in our economy today. So today I'm actually going to start out with a word. For me, words are very important. Words are kind of, in a way, I know I'm a data guy, but really words are where it's at, because data without communication is meaningless, right? So I love words. And I found this word the other day. It's one of my favorite words. And here it is. And I think it describes so well what's going on right now. That word is miserableism. Now, this is a real word, and to be clear, the definition of miserableism is the philosophy of pessimism. Or another way of putting it is, it's trying hard to convince everybody that things are really bad when in reality they're not. And look, we're in the midst of a pretty severe bout of miserableism right now, and it's okay. Sometimes being a miserabilist can work out just fine. Some of my favorite miserabilists are people who made a very good living out of it. For those of you maybe a little grayer here in the audience, remember Morrissey? He was a big miserabilist, right? A little more current generation, Louis C.K., he's a miserabilist, right? And let's not forget, of course, the biggest miserabilist, oops, that's ahead of myself. The biggest miserabilist out there of all is Wall Street, because Wall Street loves bad news. Bad news creates volatility, volatility creates trades, trades creates profits, and that's all good news. They're the biggest miserables out there. But of course, let's not forget, it's 2016. The biggest group of all miserables out there are, of course, these clowns, everybody who's running for the highest office in our land. And of course, they're running on basically a similar platform. Everybody's telling you, your life sucks, and they know how to fix it, right? Even the Donald Trump thing, right? Make America great again. Really? Our country isn't great? Give me a break. Look, I'm so tired of miserableism. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of people sitting around wringing their hands, feeling sorry for themselves. Take a step back. Look what's around you. Here's one of the dumbest questions I've seen all year. I like to say that that's the wrong question. That's what I tell my guys all the time. Not that that's the wrong answer, it's the wrong question. If you have the right question, it's much easier to get the right answer. So not too long ago, Bloomberg did a survey, and they asked 31 economists, when's the next recession going to be? And this is the result they had. A couple pessimists say it's going to be this year. A couple ultra-optimists out there say 2021, 2022. 2018 looks pretty damn dangerous, okay? Look at that. But if we get through 2018, 2019's just fine. But 2020, looking dangerous again. Look, I could give a chimp 31 darts, and I get this distribution, okay? This is meaningless. It's absolutely meaningless. It's not when is the next recession going to be, it's what's going to cause it. That's the key. What's going to cause it? Look, back in 2006, when I was Dr. Doom, and I was telling people we're going to have a real estate cycle, and it was going to cause a recession, you know, back then I had reasons to be concerned. Households weren't saving. We were vastly overbuilding our housing stock. Massive trade deficit. Dangerous buildup of credit among households and financial corporations. I go through a litany of things that should make you go, ah, this is terrible. None of those things are in place today. Look, 2015, yeah, okay, bad close of the year. Forget about it. It was a good year. It was better than it looked. Labor market's still strong, pumping forward. Forget the turmoil. There's no bubble. I cannot believe people are talking about bubbles. Same people are telling us we're in the middle of a bubble today. The same people back in 2000 saying there's no bubble, everything's fine, right? Housing, still in recovery mode, nowhere near overshot. Credit started to expand. Commodity prices are down. When did the stock market decide that low oil prices were bad? I'm pretty sure 5 years ago they told us high oil prices were bad, didn't they? Now it's low. Really? Would you make up your mind? It's starting to remind me of my grandfather. You remember, your grandfather was the same way, right? Had to walk 5 miles to school every day, uphill, both directions, in a snowstorm, 365 days a year. At what point in time did you go, you know, Grandpa, I think you're full of garbage, just saying. And of course, yes, I know about CEQA, and I agree, it's an issue for the state, but come on. California is not drying up. It's not blowing away in the wind. We haven't failed like Greece or Detroit. Quite the opposite, folks. Guess what? You're living in the middle of one of the fastest growing economies in one of the fastest growing states in the nation. So that's pretty damn good. Period. There's some good things happening. Now look, I'm not Pollyannish. I know there's issues out there. We're not growing at plus 3%. Okay, sorry, we're growing at 2.5%. Really? Is that why we're not great? Because we're a half point shy of what's normal? Come on. State and local budgets, okay, we're not putting enough money into roads, that's a problem. Putting too much money in pensions, that's a problem, I get that. The global economy, China's a mess, there's no doubt about it. Bad financial regulations, local housing shortages, pensions, entitlements, inequality, gridlock, President Trump. Look, I get it. This is all problems. These are the things that we focus on. But what's funny here about this entire list of things is not one of these things can cause a recession. Well, President Trump, maybe. But none of these other things can cause a recession. There are issues we need to focus on. There are challenges ahead of us. There are things we need to deal with. Everybody in this room, I'm glad you're here, you should be getting involved with political situation. You need to be talking to folks. You need to be joining your chambers. Because in the end, these things need to be dealt with, and that's how you deal with these things. But let's stop getting involved in these short-term panics. Let's stop listening to the nonsense and start focusing on the real challenges. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you about why I'm optimistic, and I'm going to tell you about some of these challenges that I think we need to be focusing on. Simple as that. And of course, obviously, we're going to be talking a lot about housing along the way. So 2015, yeah, okay, down into the year, forget about it. Overall, the year was about 2.4% growth, same as 2014, perhaps more importantly, final demand. Forget the overall growth rate. I like the final demand number. Final demand is the growth that comes from consumers, that comes from businesses, that comes from the government. That grew at about 2.86. That's the best increase in aggregate demand we've seen in a number of years. There's lots of good things happening inside the U.S. economy right now. The only thing that slowed us down, the trade gap widened, and I'm going to come back to that in just a second, and then some issues having to do with non-residential structural investment, and that's oil exploration. And we'll come back to that in just a second as well. Take the consumers. All winter, I heard about how terrible retail sales were. Retail sales aren't growing at all. 1% a year in your basis. That's terrible. Folks, this is the low inflation regime we're in right now. And by the way, this is a nominal number. Of course it's low. There's no inflation. Forget that. Go look at the BEA's measure. That's price adjusted. Turns out over the course of last year, we saw overall consumer spending grow in terms of goods close to 4% a year-on-year basis. People were buying stuff hand over fist. They just weren't paying a lot for it because of low inflation. Nothing wrong there. I keep reading the paper. Hey, where's the gasoline dividend? Where's the gasoline dividend? Has anybody looked at an auto dealership lately? There's your gasoline dividend. Last year, 17 million cars, one of the best years ever for auto sales. U.S. auto manufacturers through the roof, selling cars like they never have before. This is the gasoline dividend. You see, this is not the 1970s. 1970s, when gasoline prices went up, well, families had to stop spending money. When it went down again, they could spend more money. That was back when people didn't have a lot of choices. Today we have choices. Today gasoline is not that big of a part of our incomes. It doesn't that big of a driver. Here is the dividend. Here is the dividend, the true dividend of low gasoline prices. You get to walk into your garage and go, you know, I always hated that stupid Prius. I never want to drive that piece of crap again. I'm going to go me a Hummer. I'm going to drive my Hummer again. I'm proud. $2.50 a gallon. I'm living large. That's the dividend, folks, right there. All right, services did slow down just a little bit, but that's utilities. No big deal there. Healthcare, that's man-made. It's a made-up number because everything's through insurance. That's fine. And by the way, what they didn't spend, they're saving. All that savings is going to start coming out this year, and that's going to give a nice boost to consumer spending over the course of this year. Consumer incomes are up, in part because of that low inflation rate and nominal increases as well at this point in time. Employment growth's been nice and strong. We added about 2.6 million jobs over the course of the last year. I'll kind of top to bottom from percentage, construction top, professional, healthcare, administrative. Only thing negative, mining. Mining's down about 15%. That's 100,000 jobs. Again, that's the oil effect. That's tiny. That's not even half the jobs we gained in the rest of construction. It's just not a relevant sector. Good, strong labor markets. Unemployment rates continue to fall. And by the way, there's two kinds of unemployment right here. The bottom one's the headline number, that's 4.9%. The top one there, that's the U6, that includes the underemployed, that includes the discouraged workers. Yeah, I know, the U6 is higher than the unemployment rate. It always is, for the record. I always love this. Which unemployment rate's right? Neither one of them is right or wrong. They both are measuring just different kinds of things. The correlation between these two numbers is about 0.95. The only way these are right or wrong is if here's how it's right or wrong. If you're a Republican and there's a Democrat in the White House, then the top number's right. You got it? That's how it works. Otherwise, it's completely irrelevant. Newly unemployed continues to fall at this point in time. Participation rates, those are low. Yeah, but guess what? The vast majority of the decline in the participation rate can be explained by just sheer demographics. Look, if you look across our population today and you say, what is the biggest group of people out there? It's not the millennials. I am so tired of hearing of millennials. If I never hear the word millennial again, I will be happy. Now, mind you, I am a little bit of a bitter Xer. I get it, okay? But really, I'm sorry, you Xers, you're only like 3% larger than us, okay? Why do you get all the attention? It's boomers and millennials. Like, we're forgotten. Really? We're fine. We're here. And we're maybe a bit discouraged because we get run over all the time, but we're here. But forget about that. Put millennials aside. What's the biggest growth in the population? It's the 55 plus range. It's the boomers moving into retirement. That's where it's all at. 30% increase in the population 55 plus. No increase in the population between 25 and 55 over the last 10 years. That's where it's all happening. And by the way, those are the years where participation rates naturally fall. If we had not had the Great Recession, you'd already see a substantial decline in participation rate just because of boomers moving into those years. So even that number is not really telling you the truth what's going on. Consumer credit starting to expand, both in terms of credit card, auto loan note, outstanding consumer debt continuing to rise at this particular point in time. Mortgage credit starting to expand out there. It's not a problem. Again, we go back to the conversation. Is credit too tight? Is it too loose? Back in 2005, it was way too loose. Today, it's still too tight. On the right-hand side, that's the credit score at origination. The median credit score for a loan is still above 750 for a mortgage loan. That's too high. Now, mind you, the overall debt obligation ratio is low as it is, and while this number is still relatively high, there are some cracks in the mortgage market. Things are starting to flow. You are starting to see a little bit of throughput. Not great, but it's better than it was 2 years ago. There's no doubt about it. And that certainly is helping the situation. Again, this is good news. The only type of consumer credit out there we're dealing with today that seems to have rising delinquency rates is student loans. Because of the student loan crisis. Oh my God. And there's no student loan crisis. I'm so tired of hearing about this. There's no student loan crisis, folks. What does your average college student graduate with today in the way of college debt? Anyone? And NPR, and wait, NPR, they say this all the time. You hear all these guys say this. Oh, it's a life-changing experience. There's a whole generation of kids who can't do anything because of their debt. Really? Okay, average debt from a college education is? $24,000, folks. $24,000. That is not a life-altering event. That is a mid-level Kia. Stop with the nonsense. It's not a crisis. Simple as that. Look, the value of a college education today in net present value terms, that includes the higher cost of education, that includes the higher tax rate, it's still $300,000. $24,000 in debt, $300,000 in lifetime earnings. Still the best investment you're ever going to make. Let's stop talking about this being a crisis. They make a big deal out of the fact that student loan debt recently surpassed credit card debt. Let me see. Credit card debt, which you should pay off every month. Student loan debt, which gives you a lifetime of higher earnings. Really? The fact that student loan debt was less than credit card debt strikes me as more of a problem, wouldn't you say? And oh, by the way, what's amazing about this number is the fact that we still have a relatively high MPV, considering that really our students don't quite get what a college education is. It's an investment. It's an investment. Chase your dreams. Not at $60,000 a year, you shouldn't be chasing your dreams. And let me explain what I mean by this. We get some wonderful data, American Community Survey, break down incomes by degrees earned. I love this. And by the way, you've already heard some of this. What are the top earning degrees out there? Not a big surprise. Engineering, computer science, engineering, mathematics. In other words, all the degrees that don't allow you to party every single Saturday, Friday, Thursday, Wednesday, Tuesday, and typically Monday nights, okay? That's what we're talking about here, right? By the way, what degrees are people earning? Well, here's a rank order of that. Number one over the last 5 years, psychology. Now, listen, I get it, folks. You know, Americans are messed up, but really, do we need 60,000 psychologists a year? The answer is no, which is why half of these diplomas are working in Starbucks, okay? Look, this is an education, and an education is an investment. You got to have that conversation with kids today. Once you have that, all this other nonsense, there's no crisis here. Come on, stop talking about it like that. How about production? Oh my God, this thing's touchy. How about production? Oh, manufacturing's getting clobbered. It's not getting clobbered. Manufacturing output growth is still positive. Not as high as it was back in the day, but it's getting better. It's moving back up there, growing a little bit slower right now. The parts of production that's slowing down is the non-manufacturing part. That's utilities and primarily mining. No doubt about the fact that mining is getting crushed right now, but again, it's a wide range. Primary metals mining getting hit. On the other hand, motor vehicles, electrical equipment, non-metallic, petroleum refining, all up. And the biggest part of that sector that's getting hit, of course, is actually putting holes in the ground, otherwise known as drilling oil and gas wells. That's down 60%. Why? Well, because oil's cheap. Why is it cheap? It's cheap today. It was cheap back in 2009. Completely different reasons. 2009 was a demand shock, global recession. People didn't want oil. Prices fall. Today, we are not that world. Again, I pick up the news. This is what I hear. Oh, oil prices are cheap because of China. Because of China? Well, why China? Well, you know, because they're slowing down. Well, look at a number before you make it. I love reporters who just come up with stories because it sounds good. They don't bother looking at a number. Here's an important number. In 2015, China imported, ready, 9% more oil than they did in 2014. Then repeat, from 2014 to 2015, they increased their imports of oil by 9%. Why is this China? It's not. It's nonsense. I'll tell you who it is. It's the United States. Oil production in the U.S. has gone gangbusters over the last 5 years. Why? Very simple. Fracking. Like it or hate it, global warming enthusiast, global warming denier, this is a game changer. It's a game changer. We've doubled oil production. The U.S. right now is producing more oil than any other nation, producing 15% more oil per year than Saudi Arabia is, 20% more than Russia is. People say, why isn't Saudi Arabia trying to drive up prices? I'll tell you why. They're not the swing player anymore. We are. Because we haven't even touched our resources. We haven't even touched our shale resources. By the way, we're still producing almost 10 million barrels a day, even in the midst of this cheap oil. Why? They got so far ahead of themselves when the oil prices collapsed. There were 2,100 drilled holes, drilled wells in North Dakota and Texas that they hadn't even taken the oil out of yet. They were so far ahead of themselves. So nothing's changing, folks. Oil's going to be cheap for a long time because this is a new world. Now, by the way, I believe in global warming. This is a great time to put a $1 a gallon gasoline tax out there and use the money to rebuild roads and bridges and put it into battery technology. Not going to happen. Don't worry about it. Not going to happen. Clearly it should. Is it going to hurt the economy? No, it's not going to hurt the economy. We saw this back in the 80s. Back in the mid-80s, oil prices collapsed, oil industry got hammered. And by the way, it didn't matter to everybody. It didn't matter to anybody. And this time around, it's not even as bad. Because this time around, it's not, back then we saw prices go down and we saw production collapse. This time prices went down, production hasn't collapsed, which means all these secondary industries are still busy, still employing jobs. If you don't believe me, just look at the numbers. Okay, North Dakota's getting crushed. Who cares? Houston hasn't even seen a decline in jobs. They've slowed down. They're not growing as fast. Dallas doesn't even know there's a problem in the oil markets. They're growing gangbusters. Look, I would love to tell you this is Texas's comeuppance. It's not. I'm sorry. They are slowing down, though, quite a bit, and it turns out that's just not the deal. What about trade? Oh, we're getting crushed because of exports. No, we're not getting crushed. The trade deficit is not opening because of exports. Exports have been steady for the last 2 years. They have not fallen at all. Real imports are going up. That's the change. See, what's happening, the reason the trade deficit is widening is because we have a strong economy and the global economy is wobbly. We're buying lots of stuff, particularly from China, and that's what's driving the trade deficit open. But our exports haven't fallen, despite the fact that the dollar's up. And by the way, what's really interesting about this graph is it turns out that the trade deficit is widening primarily with China. And oh, by the way, the dollar has primarily appreciated with the euro. In fact, the dollar-Chinese exchange rate has only changed by about 4.5%. And yet that's where the trade deficit is widening. So you can't even talk about the trade deficit from being really a dollar phenomenon. It's not. It's not a dollar phenomenon at all. It's a U.S. buying Chinese products phenomenon. That's what's going on out there. Simple as that. Now, how about China? How big of a mess? I don't know. Nobody really knows. Well, here's what I know about China. They're slowing down, not a big surprise. They had two big sources of growth. One was exports, then two was infrastructure. Both those sources of growth have tapped out. They have enough high-speed rails. The world can't handle much more in the way of Chinese exports. They got to find the third level. The third lever, by the way, is professionalizing your economy, liberalizing industry, spinning off state-owned enterprises. More consumption, less investment. In other words, all the things that communist governments don't want to do. And that's a big problem, because that means it's going to be hard for them to grow rapidly. On the other side of it, are they going to collapse? No. Why? Because they're not liberalized. All those state-owned enterprises, all those trillions of dollars of debt are owned to state-owned banks. None of those companies go bankrupt if the communist government says they don't go bankrupt. Simple as that. It doesn't matter. So in a sense, their stability is also their problem. And I don't know where you go in that sort of circumstances. But what I do know is it doesn't matter much for us. In fact, it's probably a good thing for us. After all, slow-growing China means cheaper commodity prices. That's good for us. A slow-growing China means less consumption of their own capital, which means that capital is going out into the world today, which means low interest rates, which is good for us. This isn't a bad thing. It's fine. And oh, by the way, while China's slowing down, Europe's speeding up. Remember a couple years ago, everybody was panicking about Europe, everybody's panicking about Greece. No one's talking about it now. Why? That's because things are okay. It turns out, as I noted, Greece is irrelevant. And Europe will get out of this mess, and they are, and they're growing. Unemployment's falling, production's up. Not great, but it's growing. And that's an offset to China. Look, the global economy is slowing down, but it's not going from 6% to 1%. It's going from 5% to 4%. It's okay. Not that big of a deal. Non-residential is growing nice and strong. You have better numbers in lodging, office, retail, warehouse, all seeing better investment inside the United States. The only thing that's really not getting invested in right now is infrastructure. That's, of course, because governments are getting more money, but they're putting in overstuffed pensions. That's a real problem. There's no doubt about it. But again, at least things are a little bit better. Things are looking a little bit up on that front. As for housing itself, National Front, last year wasn't a bad year. Look, we had almost 5.5 million sales. Obviously, it wasn't 2006, but that was pretty good relative to the last 5, 6, 7 years or so. Home prices are still appreciating about 5% on a year-on-year basis. Nothing wrong there. Biggest levels of appreciation are the West and the South. This is looking over the last year compared to the previous year. In Portland, San Francisco, Denver, up there near the top. You got San Diego, Dallas, Atlanta, kind of there in the center. Really only in the Northeast, where home prices are growing relatively slowly right now. Delinquencies, non-existent. There's the foreclosure market. We just did the REO conference a couple days ago, and my news of the REO guys was, find another job. I didn't say it quite like that, but that's kind of what I said. Because there's just not a lot of kids out there. I mean, even right now, California, believe it or not, has one of the lowest mortgage delinquency rates in the nation. The only ones that still have high delinquency rates are Nevada, New Jersey, Florida. Those are, of course, the judicial states where you got to go through a bankruptcy court to get a foreclosure done. So, you know, homeowner bill of rights, give me a break. This is a great way to clear the market and get moving forward again. Nice and good. As for affordability, again, prices haven't gone too far. Quite the opposite. We're still in recovery mode. And what you're seeing right now, that once you come for these low interest rates, affordability is still better than it was in 2002. And by the way, there's lots of good indicators the housing market is starting to improve. Take, for example, just the equity ratio in our U.S. housing market. It's back to normal levels right now. That's pretty good. It is true construction is still relatively weak, large in the single-family front, largely, again, because of that lack of credit out there, but credit is starting to loosen up just a little bit. Home sales are starting to increase slowly but surely. And, of course, well, this is on the right-hand side. That's the mortgage origination. You can see how that 720 is still very low, very little credit moving there. Things are getting a little bit better out there. There's no doubt about it. And certainly, there's better numbers on the other side of it. This is two of my favorite numbers. On the left-hand side is change in households in the U.S. And you can see, you know, back in the bubble period, we had almost 2 million new households forming. Of course, that was when your 22-year-old announced they'd just gotten their first subprime mortgage, and we're moving out, and we're going to be the next real estate millionaire. You go forward, when that number collapses below 500,000, that's when your now 24-year-old has moved back into your basement because they got foreclosed on and didn't have a job, okay? Well, just in the last year or so, you're starting to see an increase here. Overall vacancy rates are going down. Home builder confidence is starting to rise. It's not going to be a great year for new home sales, but it's going to be a good year. It's not going to be a great year for overall home sales, but it's going to be a good year. Things are really starting to move forward, and we're starting to see what we think is a return to home ownership. Again, slowly, but it's absolutely starting to occur out there, and the FHA started to get involved too, and they're pushing things forward as well. That's good news on front. As for apartments themselves, things have kind of stabilized. Rents are still going up, although a slightly slower basis. Overall vacancy rates are sort of hit bottom right now. One of the big questions is there going to be a big sell-off? Is it going to be a big problem? Have we overbuilt in the multifamily space? Not really. It's interesting. You know, over the last 6-7 years or so, we've seen about 5.5 million new renting households. Well over half of those new renting households, close to 3 million renters, actually have ended up in single-family rentals. And what history shows us, we saw this big cycle in the late 80s, early 90s as well, you'll see a big increase in single-family rentals. Market starts to return, those single-family rentals get sold off back into the owner-occupied market. I've already talked to a number of hedge funds that own a bunch of single-family rentals, and they're getting ready to start selling them off. Some of those may be sold to small investors. A lot of those will probably be sold to people who are now getting back in the owner-occupied space. So I do see this again as being an important trend, particularly out here from the Inland Empire, where there's a lot of single-family rentals. And some of those will surely be converted over to owner-occupancy over the next couple of years, so good news on that particular front. As for the bubble itself, there's no bubble. I'm so tired of hearing about bubble. Don't even worry about bubbles. Forget the concept of a bubble. 4 reasons. First, let's talk about asset prices themselves. Who's taking finance? Remember your little finance class? All right, if you took your finance class, I mean, the very first question they said to you is, okay, you got a dividend that gives you $100 per year, and the interest rate's 5%, and it gives you that flow forever. What's the value of that asset, right? And you go, oh, okay, I remember that one. You take the flow 100 and you put over the interest rate 5%, and lo and behold, it's worth $2,000. Yay, got 800. Okay, and it says, well, what happens if the interest rate goes down to 3%? Well, now the asset price goes to $3,000. You see, yes, asset prices have come up a lot, but they're coming up because of low interest rates. We are moving into a high asset price, low return world. That's what we've seen over the last year, is that sort of situation. And oh, by the way, interest rates aren't going anywhere. They're still low. Oh, they said, oh, as soon as they end quantitative easing, interest rates are going to go up. No, they're not. Well, as soon as the Fed starts to tighten, no, that's not going to do anything either. Now, I'm not sure I agree with Bruce on this idea that we're going to see interest rates continue to fall. I expect 10-year bond rates to come back up a little above 2% or so. Mortgage rates probably get above 4%, but that's about it. Look, interest rates are low for a very simple reason. We live in a world that's awash with capital. Lots of capital, not a lot of demand. That's a low interest rate regime. That's where we are right now, simple as that. By the way, even if that doesn't convince you that financial prices are fine where they are right now, they make sense, let's go to the next step. Even if you think that financial prices have gone too high, go to the next step. Doesn't matter. And that's the other part of it. We have bought into this mythology that somehow or other the stock market can create a recession. It can't. It hasn't. It never will. Stock market reflects the economy. And when there are real problems in the economy is suffering and the stock market's suffering as well. But, I mean, I think John said this as well. The stock market's predicted, I don't know, about 14 of the last 5 recessions. Indeed, this is the 3rd double-digit sell-off in the market since 2010. And nothing's happened to the regular economy. I'm so tired of hearing about how financial prices can create recessions. They cannot. They cannot. And if you don't believe that, go back in time. Find some old trader and go, hey, what happened in October 1987? Oh, look at this faraway look in their eyes, this post-traumatic stress look syndrome. Oh, Sonny, it was awful. Blood in the streets, Black Monday. The markets declined by 30% in 2 days. It was awful. Okay, what happened to the rest of the economy in October 1987? Anyone? It's a fine year. It's a fine year. I turned 20 that year. It was great, right? Nothing happened. The economy was fine. 88, fine. 89, fine. You get it? Didn't matter. So stop buying into it. Stop worrying about it. It just doesn't matter. The stock market largely behaves like a room full of first graders drinking espresso and playing full contact musical chairs. There's a lot of noise, a lot of action, and not a lot of logic. That is what you're dealing with. So let's go through it. Stock market at an all-time high. Yeah, guess what? So are corporate profits. They've been growing faster than the source of income. Look at a forward-looking PE ratio. It's 20. That's not bad, particularly when interest rates are that low. You flip that over, EP or your cap rate, compare that to a 10-year treasury, that's your equity earning spread, very much like a cap rate spread. Looks just fine. And by the way, the financials of American companies are just fine. Their debt-to-equity ratios are nice and low. No problems here. What about tech? Tech's a bubble. No, it's not. Back in 2000, the tech PE ratio was 152. Today it's 27. Back in 2000, you had a nice suit and a website, they gave you $20 million for no reason. Today you have to have a real business plan. What about the unicorns? What about them? Let me tell you a story. Anybody know what a unicorn is, by the way? That's $1 billion company that never made a penny. That's a terrible deal. Clearly that's a problem, is it? I'll tell you a story about an old unicorn. Anybody ever hear of Skype? $1 billion company, never made a penny until they sold themselves to Microsoft for $4 billion. I wish I had that idea. Give me a break. And besides, what happened in 2001 was not NASDAQ. That's what they tell you. Oh, NASDAQ collapsed and tech bubble collapsed. No, NASDAQ reflected what happened. And what happened was real demand. Look, from 97 to 2000, there was a huge increase in business spending on information technology. Everybody got sucked into the new economy. Got to be in the new economy. Got to have websites. Got to have eyeballs. Got to have networks. Companies poured billions of dollars in new money in information technology. Corporate profits fell from 97 to 2000. They went down because the new economy was a fraud. 2000, Y2K. Remember Y2K? Some of you are like, huh? The rest of you are like, oh yeah, remember that? Complete nonsense. That's what killed it. Business said enough is enough. Forget your new economy BS. I'm out of here. And you saw a big decline in business spending for each other, and that's what caused a collapse in technology, not NASDAQ. Risk factors in our economy. Leverage. Always be scared of big buildup in leverage. There is none. We're just coming out of the last deleveraging cycle. No problem here whatsoever. How about interest rates? Inflation. No sign of inflation. No sign of money driver. All that money generated through Q1, 2, and 3. So the bank's form of excess reserves. Simple as that. And then the Fed itself, best explanation of interest rates I've ever seen. Turns out federal funds rate is only linked to the height of the federal chairman. Simple as that. As long as they keep hiring shorter chairmen, you're going to see interest rates fall. Look, that's obviously not true. What's going on here is we're in the midst of a 30-year decline in interest rates. as simple as that. And you know, Federal Reserve, every time the Federal Reserve meets, we are subjected to article after article after article about the federal funds rate. Look, the federal funds rate is largely what I call the Kim Kardashian of the financial news world. A lot of press, constantly in your face. In reality, it is completely irrelevant to anything your life is about. And if I never heard Kim Kardashian's name ever again, my life would not be diminished at all. And that's the same thing with the federal funds rate. It's irrelevant. Look, that's an overnight rate between banks that the Federal Reserve used to try to control the money supply. It's got no impact on 10-year bond. Every time I call my dad, my 80-year-old octogenarian Fox News watching dad, and I got to get an earful about how that funny little woman in the Fed hates seniors because she's killing my bond returns. The 10-year bond rate is set in an auction. It's a market rate. It's not controlled by the Federal Reserve. It's not controlled by the government. Simple as that. And by the way, the reason it's low right now is because there's a lot of capital relative to demand for it. Simple as that. This is a low interest rate regime and it's not going anywhere. How about California? What's going on? Well, look, I told you this last couple of years. Everybody wrote us off. Oh, you're business unfriendly, high taxes, bad regulations, everybody's fleeing the state. Nonsense. Absolute nonsense. Our state's growing like gangbusters. This is 2014. The darker the shape, the faster the growth rate. So we're right up there. Yeah, we're keeping pace with Texas, that business-friendly state. Because you know Texas's growth is all about business friendliness, right? Well, let's go to 2015. Oops. Turns out it was dead dinosaurs that was driving Texas forward. Not so much taxes, as the case may be. And we're still growing rapidly, along with Nevada, Utah, all that kind of stuff. I mean, look, we're top 10 for growth over the last 20 years, 30% of job growth compared to 20% for the nation overall. Folks, this state's doing fine. What kind of jobs? You know, overall, about 2.8% increase in jobs. Construction, logistics, information, healthcare, all leading the charts from a percentage standpoint. State employment by region. Monterey. I keep hearing this dichotomy. People keep repeating this nonsense. Well, the coastal areas are doing great, but the inland areas are in a depression. They're doing terrible. Really? Would someone please look at a number before you have an opinion? Just one number. Maybe two. It's helpful. Before you have an opinion. Fastest growing parts of the state. Monterey, Stockton, then San Jose and San Francisco, then the Inland Empire, and you got Solano, Santa Cruz, Sacramento, Tulare, Fresno, Modesto. Does it sound to you like the inland areas are mired in a depression? No. And the inland areas are growing faster than the coastal areas for the most part, with the exception of San Jose and San Francisco. Simple as that. And you can see it out here in terms of big taxable sales increases across the overall region. Wait, did I skip where's my, oh, there it is. Here's the Inland Empire numbers, 3.5% a year-on-year basis. Logistics is near the top, big numbers there in terms of growth, 9%, 8,400 jobs in warehouse. That was a big year after a couple slow ones, and got government, construction, healthcare. So good things happen out here. Manufacturing added 3% to the payroll workforce. That's very good, by the way, to the U.S. overall. U.S. overall added about less than 0.5% to the manufacturing workforce. There's lots of new manufacturing jobs in the Inland Empire. It's not true that they're going away. They're here. Some things are happening, no doubt about it. Good numbers here across the board. Only thing down, education and administrative. Some of the temporary workers, some temp company closed. And over the course of the last couple of quarters, through the beginning of 2015, worker wages starting to rise again, no doubt about it. Unemployment rate continues to fall. And by the way, and pardon me, John, I'm gonna push back just a little bit. John likes to say that logistics is the biggest, most important industry out here. I disagree. Your biggest industry here, your most important industry here, is the 20% of workers who get in their cars and drive west for work every day. That's huge. And by the way, they shouldn't have to do that. We'll come back to that in just a second. But let me put this in context. On the right-hand side, there's labor force. Not employment, not payroll employment jobs in the area. Labor force, employed people who live here, doesn't matter where they work. It's by residence. And it's amazing, you look at these numbers. Obviously, Los Angeles has the biggest labor force in the state, 5 million people. Number 2, Inland Empire, 2 million people there. You're bigger than Orange County. You're bigger than San Diego. You're bigger than East Bay. You're twice the size of San Jose. Huge labor force here. 600,000 more in the labor force employed than there are in the payroll workforce. Again, because of that huge outflow of people on a daily basis. And by the way, the people who live here and commute, we did a study on this not too long ago for UC Riverside. Those people have more education and earn substantially higher income than people who live and work in the Inland Empire. These people are skilled. They're not here because They can't afford to live there. This isn't, the coastal area is throwing out their rejects. These are people who are making a lifestyle choice. I don't want to live in a tiny house in West LA. I want a backyard. And those are the people who are coming here. And the numbers are relatively good. Overall, San Bernardino's a little bit behind, but Riverside's pretty good. Overall change, and this is median household incomes, and I'm breaking it down for you. So median household income, for example, Riverside in 2006 was $53,000. Today it's $57,000. That's an increase of about 6.5%, a little less than the state and the nation overall, but still moving forward. San Bernardino's down just a little bit, no doubt about that. What's amazing about this is look at the share of households over 100,000, making over $100,000 a year. In the U.S., it's 23%, California up 30%, Riverside County 24%, San Bernardino 21%. So roughly on par with the nation overall. And by the way, they're growing rapidly. In San Bernardino Riverside, by our count, over that 8-year period, there are 60,000 households, more households making over 100K a year in the Inland Empire. 60,000 more households. There's some money out there, folks. There's some money in them hills, okay? And that's going to keep coming, there's no doubt about it. And as for economic output over since 2001, 2014, about a 25% increase overall. What's the biggest contributors? Well, believe it or not, government. But that's mainly education because of the giant population growth you see down here. Healthcare is number 2. Professional services number 3, added 3.6% to that 24%. Wholesale trade, retail trade, and then you go down to logistics. Logistics, yeah, it's been a big job growth over the last couple of years, but really from an output perspective, since 2001 to 2014, it's only added less than 1/8 of the overall growth of the economy here. Lots of things going on out here. They're not all wrapped around logistics. Lots of things happening out here. As for state output overall, again, we're growing faster in the U.S. This is Q2 14 to Q2 15. And I rank these in order of what's growing faster in the state compared to the U.S. overall. And it's an amazing list because it starts out with ag, construction, professional, management, accommodation, information, durable goods manufacturing growing faster here in terms of output than the U.S. overall. All the way down the list, and it's not until you get to mining, non-durable goods manufacturing, those guys do get clobbered by regulations. Education, service, utilities, you start seeing negative numbers. Now let's go through that top. I want to start with ag. What, ag? Wait, ag? We're in a drought. Ag's doing well? Yeah. Look, I'm so tired of hearing about this drought. You remember last year, Jerry Brown got up and said, hey, by the way, you need to stop taking showers because we don't have enough water. Lawns, forget about it. Those are evil. And he put all the cutbacks on the urban areas. Why? Because those ag folks, they took it on the chin. They've already suffered enough. It's amazing that you could say that out loud when, as it turns out, given the numbers they just released, 2014 was the best year ever for agricultural revenues in the state of California. Best year ever. 6% increase in revenues from 2013 to 2014. By the way, ag, the 1.6% of our state economy we call ag, uses 4 times as much water as all the urban areas put together. Had the cutbacks that were put on urban areas applied to agriculture, that would have cut their water supplies by about 5 or 6%, or roughly the increase in revenues we saw. Start to see my point here? There's something going on. And it's not that we don't have enough water. It's that ag is using a lot of water and not really using it for much of anything. Look, this is probably for me the most frustrating thing at all. In 2014, the single largest crop in the state of California by acreage, 1.3 million acres, was put into hay. Hay, alfalfa, forage production, various sorts of grasses. This is about 1 million. There's about 300,000 and other stuff that isn't listed on here. But about 1 million, well over 1 million acres. Let me put that in context. Hay, which uses 5 acre feet per acre per year. An acre foot's enough for 2 households. In other words, the hay crop all by itself uses about 6 million acre feet of water per year. That's over half what every single urban area together uses. Hay. Grass. Now, mind you, if you point this out to the ag folks, they'll say, yeah, well, you don't understand. See, you don't understand. You don't know nothing about agriculture. See, they need that hay for the dairy guys. Really? Well, first of all, factually, that's not true. Because the only thing you do is look around. You see all the time trucks coming in with hay piled up on it. You can bring hay in from Alabama where they have lots and lots of water, okay? Yeah, it's a little more expensive, but trust me, the increased cost of that hay from shipping it from Alabama is a hell of a lot cheaper than the billions of dollars we're being asked to spend on reclamation projects and conservation projects and all this kind of stuff. That's a joke. But putting that to one side, guess what? The hay in the state's not being used for dairy. 1/4 of our hay crop last year, 1/4 of our hay crop went overseas, was shipped abroad to feed foreign cows and pigs. Number 1 on the list, Chinese cows and pigs. Number 2, Japanese cows and pigs. Number 3, Korean cows and pigs. And then you get the UAE cows and pigs. 1.5 million acre feet of water was put on boats and shipped at rock bottom prices to feed Chinese-speaking cows and pigs. I'm sorry, I have a real problem with that. So we need to have a conversation about this, there's no doubt about it, but the conversation isn't what are we going to do about our water shortage, it's what are we going to do about the guys who are exporting water in the middle of a drought. Okay, it's not the fish's fault, folks. The fish don't have nothing to do with this. I'm not going to worry about this so much. And housing, last but not least, housing. Look, we're growing our payroll workforce almost 3% per year. We're growing our labor force over 1% per year. That works when we have unemployment, when we have slack in the system. Guess what? We're running out of slack. State unemployment is getting close to 5%. What are you going to do? Well, at that point in time, you want the state to continue to grow fast, you have to build housing for them. And that's our biggest issue. Not taxes, not regulations, it's a lack of housing. Look at the numbers. Prices are coming up, there's no doubt about it. Very little inventory. We're not, in terms of apartments, again, same sort of thing. Rents continue to go up, very little inventory out there, no doubt about it. Bubble, not even close. Interest rates being low where they are, affordability is still good in our own very unaffordable sort of way. But relative to the U.S., we're becoming more and more expensive on a day-by-day basis. We have one of the lowest housing vacancy rates, one of the worst overcrowded housing situations. We don't build anywhere close to enough housing. Here we are in the midst of an economic boom, and everything's going wonderful, and we're not building housing. Right now, we're adding 4 people in the state for every new permit. In San Bernardino, it's 5 people per permit. In Riverside, it's 4.5 people per permit. We are still not building enough housing. When you ask yourself why prices are going up, it's basic supply and demand phenomena. Why don't we build it? Well, CEQA Prop 13, simple as that. California Environmental Quality Act, every NIMBY, every clown, every special interest, every scumbag lawyer who needs a buck gets involved in the CEQA business. Because you can make almost endless money, it seems like, filing frivolous lawsuits. But don't forget Prop 13. Don't forget Prop 13. Sit down with any city manager and say, hey, you got 20 acres of land. What do you want to do with it? Hey, man, this is cost-benefit analysis. This is 101. I want retail, first and foremost. I love retail, taxable sales. Bring it. If I can't have retail, I'll take office. Because guess what? That doesn't use any kind of local services, but at least people come in and spend money in my local neighborhood, and I get the gross receipts tax maybe. If I can't have that, I'll take single family. Because they use some services, and they tend to be a little more well-heeled. So it's not that much of a money loser. Or last thing I want is high density residential. Those are low income families, they use lots of public services. That's a money loser hand over fist. So in a sense, we empower the NIMBYs, and then we make sure the local governments support the NIMBYs. Because they don't want the high density residential anymore than anybody else does. I was in a panel not too long ago up in the Bay Area. And you know, every once in a while you'll get a mayor. He's relatively enlightened. We had Mayor Steele in San Jose came in, so I want multifamily. They build lots of multifamily. And the next mayor comes in with a new financial TED, and the first thing they say is no more residential. We're done. We're getting killed. Our budget's getting wiped out because of all our new residents when all the jobs are going to Mountain View. Can't do that. Oh, and they want to do a split roll. Get rid of Prop 13 for commercial, but not for residential? You just made the problem worse, not better. If anything, we should get the split roll, leave commercial under Prop 13 protection, get it off of residential. Make it worth having residential, then cities will build it. But in the meantime, we play this terrible tragedy of the commons. No one wants it. They want someone else to do it. And then the result is we're out of housing. And that, of course, is going to slow down this wonderful growth spurt. Just look at the numbers. Right now, residential permits, not doing much out here. On the other hand, non-residential, going up, nice and sharp. So listen, you got to have a little bit of everything. Warehouses are fine, manufacturing facilities are fine, but you got to have housing. Now mind you, this is really bad for the coasts. This is kind of good for the Inland Empire, because the Inland Empire tends to be a little more open, a little more supportive of these sort of efforts. So they're going to come here, and there's going to be good growth. There's going to be people buying homes, and these are going to be high-income folks who are commuting in. And then eventually you're going to figure out how to convince the employers that as opposed to making half your workforce driving to the Inland Empire, why don't you just open an office out here? And they will. And they're going to see places like Riverside in Ontario, great urbanized communities start to flower. Look, I've said this all along. Inland Empire got whacked, there's no doubt through this last cycle, but the fundamentals are incredibly strong out here. And this place is already starting to see the benefits of that. It's going to roar back. The issue now is how do we maintain momentum? And the primary issues of maintaining momentum primarily wrap around making sure we have enough housing. And unfortunately, no one's talking about this in Sacramento. So, what to worry about, what not to worry about? Don't worry about the dollar, doesn't matter that much. Worry about China, could be a big mess. Don't worry about student debt, worry about educational choices. Don't worry about asset bubbles, worry about bad financial regulations that are freezing people in the housing market. Don't worry about the drought, do worry about water policy. Don't worry about spending, worry about savings. Don't worry about labor markets, worry about growing wealth inequality. Don't worry about business, California business. Worry about California housing. Don't worry about taxes, worry about lack of public investment. Don't worry about California tax levels, worry about tax structure. Don't worry about politics. Yeah, I know. Trump, oh my God, really? Politics has always been ugly. That's the nature of the beast. The key here is about being involved. Simple as that. You don't need a PhD to understand what's wrong. You do need a PhD to figure out why our politicians don't seem to understand that. And what I can tell you is it's because we're not getting involved. Got to get out there, support your chambers, support these groups. If we have real conversations about substantive issues, we can push the ball forward. If we're allowing ourselves to be distracted by shiny toys, we're not going to get there. Have a good year.
So we do have a couple of questions, about 6 or 8 of them. So let me actually come over here to see if I can't find this out. Is anybody concerned about NIRP? Who asked that question? What is NIRP? So would they know what they're concerned about? Negative interest rate policy. Negative interest rates in Japan.
No.
Don't care about it.
No, look, that's a bank policy. It's about trying to get the bank. Look. So, when you think about quantitative easing, understand that that's not designed to lower interest rates. It's about maintaining money supply growth. If you can't do it through traditional federal funds policy rate, then you have to go to the next step, which is to buy bonds, put the money in the banks, and hope the banks actually lend it out. The problem there is that last part. If they're not lending it out, how do you get them to lend it out? Well, one way is to go to negative bank interest rates, which basically charge them for hanging on to reserves. So that is a bank policy. You would be concerned about that if you thought U.S. banks weren't lending. They are. Bank balances right now are growing at about 7.5% on a year-on-year basis. There is not a problem with bank lending, and so therefore there would be no reason for a negative interest rate regime. But remember, those negative interest rates you keep hearing about, that's not on checking accounts. That's really a financial number for banks. It's not a consumer number that people are actually seeing.
Everybody agree? Yeah? Okay, all right. Then how about, there's a question about does the decline in number of appraisers have an impact? Anybody got I know the appraisal industry, anybody in here, we have any appraisers in here? Are you happy to be appraiser today compared to where you were maybe 8 years ago? Most of the appraisers I know are not as happy today as they were 8 years ago.
That's because they don't get the kickbacks anymore.
No kickbacks. There certainly are less appraisers with QM and all the rest of that sort of stuff. Anybody got any comments on the appraisal industry as it relates to what we do in this room? Keep in mind what most of the people in this room do is residential real estate, either selling, financing, or some ancillary service associated with that.
I'm finding that appraisals are becoming a little more realistic in terms of the market, whereas before they tended to be really very, very conservative because of the pressure on appraisers after what occurred in the 08, 07, 06 period of time.
I think you guys came in a little late as I was doing the introductions, just before Bruce's presentation. And I don't know, maybe specifically to Dr. Husing, you might have a number that's different. But the Inland Empire, which I'll define as everything within CRMLS, pretty much covers all of us, median price went up about almost 10% in the last 2 years, but in the last 12 months, flat, basically 0.5% increase.
That's not true.
No, that's not I agree, it's not true.
Okay, so what's true?
About 6%.
Yeah, about 5 or 6%.
In the Inland Empire?
Yeah.
I just caution to put percentage in perspective. I was out in Alabama on a project, and people were talking about how in some city they had 100% growth. So after they talk about it for 25 minutes, I asked them what the population was, and it was 1,500 people. So percentage is one thing. You have to look at absolute numbers and what the baseline is and what are you going from. You know, if you have price collapse 50%, and you're going by 10%, that's great, but you're going from half, right? So you have to put it on in perspective. On the question of appraisals, I think the biggest dangers to appraisals is technology. You know, you got so much data now and big data, and then you got Google Maps where you can drive literally in every street and look at every house, and as technology improves where you can get there almost in real time, all the time, I think over time it's probably going to evolve into something else, but
More technology.
More technology, yeah.
More technology. Okay, what else we got up here? Well, the infill of land, is that the land one? Yeah, a whole bunch. Boy, whoever this person has, like 10 questions. Let's just pick one of them. Will the influx of land with logistics centers squeeze available space for single-family houses? So is there a problem? Too many warehouses, not enough houses being built? No?
I think jobs drive housing, and so we need more jobs. I think one thing, we still need housing, and we have a lot of issues with housing, has been described, but it all starts with jobs, right? And so I think logistics is just another opportunity. There's a lot of market sectors, a lot of business sectors that are doing well or will continue to do well and expand, but either one of them needs to be here. But in reality, logistics, although they occupy relatively a large number of acres to a building per se, but compared to the land availability in the Inland Empire, there's way far more zone for residential type uses than for commercial and industrial uses.
Yeah, I don't see residential being switched to industrial in order to accommodate logistics and distribution. I do see sometimes office switching to industrial, which you just saw occur in Ontario on the 10 freeway to the north, where there was a large office zoned area that just recently went to industrial. But I don't see that occurring with residential.
One thing that will happen is that you'll see multi-story, we're already designing 100-foot clear height buildings in logistics. So instead of expanding horizontally, you're going to see it going up.
Okay, and hopefully one of you guys know the answer to this. How many lots, finished lots, are in Riverside, San Bernardino County right now that could be built on, but economically, it just doesn't make sense to do that right now? Residential.
No idea.
No, wouldn't you have a clue?
Don't know.
Not very much.
Not very much. Okay. And is the entitlements, I mean, Iddo and you and I were talking off stage about in Moreno Valley, anyway, it's $110,000 per lot in fees.
The impediment to housing is not so much lack of availability of land, but rather the threshold of cost. So if you take a raw piece of land, let's say it's in Tuttle, where you can put a permit, in an area like Moreno Valley, which is typical in the Inland Empire, before you can put a stick in the ground, it costs you about $110,000.
What?
So,
Wait, for what? For a house?
no, for a lot. A finished lot cost in a city like Moreno
Are you
Valley.
including the land costs?
Yeah, but the land, if you residual back to the land, it's literally zero.
You're saying there's $110,000 in permits and fees?
And, no, finished lot cost, which includes, right, the land, but I said the land component in that number is very little.
So you're saying mostly is
permits and everything.
Nah, I just completely disagree with that number. We run the numbers on this. That's
what is it?
wrong. It's like 25, 30, 40,000
The
max.
fees?
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely.
Oh, a good fight.
I want to know where it is because I want to go there and pull those.
Look, well, listen. We started doing a study on this for the California Home Builder Foundation, and this is important. And you need to listen up because this is important for you too,
I don't want
young
to.
man.
What year were you born?
67.
I'd been teaching college 3 years by then.
All right, well.
All right, go get him, Chris.
Anyway, putting that to one side, there's a lot of new stuff out there now, John. You'd be surprised. Anyway, we started running this study for the California Home Builders Foundation because we want to know about this. I wanted to calculate. I want to figure out what the fees and the costs and all the stuff you ended up. And so we went to the California Home Builders Foundation. Hey, they're like, this is great. What a great idea. We're going to get some builders who work with us, and we're going to have them pull a bunch of numbers, and we're going to compare, say, California to Texas. And we had some of the big builders, and we got stonewalled. Completely stonewalled. Could not get any data on anybody. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. I'm like, shouldn't these people be like jumping to help me do this study right and get these numbers? Some data did squeak out. Some numbers did come to us. And when we started to realize this is not a permit fee, this is not a tax, this is not a higher cost of labor phenomenon. Indeed, if you talk about a house being built in Texas and a house being built in California, it is true that California is more expensive, but the difference in the costs is a tiny fraction of the difference in the selling price. And then I went, oh, yeah, Economics 101. This is stuff even John learned back in the day. This is called a barrier to entry. You see, the home builders, the big guys in particular, love CEQA. They love Prop 13. They love neighborhood councils because it keeps the competition out. Yeah, maybe they're building 4 houses in Texas for every house they build in California. Guess what? They're making 4 times the profit in the house in California than what they're making compared to Texas. And that's when I started to worry a lot about this, because I realized that, again, this is basic stuff. I started to realize the people you think will be your friends on this are not. They're exactly the ones who like the status quo. That is a problem, and we have to recognize that.
It's a mixed bag, because I could tell you we have a lot of lots, several thousand lots. So what does the 110,000? So what does the 110,000 complies with? So you got 30, 40, sometimes $50,000 in fees. You got to grade the lot, right? You got to bring utilities and so forth. And if you add all those costs up before you can build a house, it's about $110,000. Now, if you could sell houses for $350, $400, and $450. Right, you could build. But if a house sells in Moreno Valley, what's the median price now in Moreno Valley?
$250.
Okay, so $250, you start with $110,000 finished lot cost. That's what most builders are.
The vast majority of the country, you have to have utilities, you have to grade, you have to put in roads, and yet somehow or other, in places like Rochester, New York, which, by the way, New York is not a regulation-friendly state, they still sell brand new houses for $200,000. So again, I'm sorry, that does not fly for me.
Look, you can do the numbers and we can do together later.
Right.
Because if people knew how to build brand new homes and sell them for $200,000, they would be.
They do. They do in Texas, they do in
No, in Texas, not in California. So here's the other hidden cost. Maybe it's Prop 14, what cities do. So you have the official fees, but then like anything else, they come out to you and say, well, you know what, we need all this other stuff. And pretty soon in California, you're conditioned to build all kinds of infrastructure all over the place. I'm in a deal right now. We got approval for the World Logistics Center, 41 million square feet. All done. CEQA is done. All the things analyzed. Well, you sit down with people who are saying, well, you know what, well, we don't have the power, the infrastructure. Well, we want you to spend $78 million bringing the power. And then you just give it to us. And then we don't have roads. So,
well, this goes back to Prop 13, though.
Yeah.
I mean, they do that because this is a money-losing problem, not because they want to hold you up, but because these are money-losing propositions.
And the hidden cost of CEQA, which doesn't come into the official register. That's why builders may want to disclose it. So I'll disclose it because I'll tell you. We spent $23 million doing the EIR. 40,000 pages for the World Logistics Center. If there was one person who read the document, I'll pay him $1 million. Okay? So $23 million, 4.5 years to do. Okay? Hidden costs. Nobody charges us to a fee, to anything else. But the cost of delay. So calculate out $500, $600 million worth of property, waiting around 5-6 years to get to the CEQA process. That's the cost.
Oh yeah, that's a big cost.
So when I say 110, it isn't that you go to the menu of costs and say, gee, they're only charging you $28,000 in fees. We should be able to build a house. But wait a minute, look at what the cost in. So most builders are waiting for the pricing to get there, so there's a real margin. But we won't get into all of that.
But I think actually we're agreeing for the most part, because even the delay, that's the barrier to entry we talk about.
Yes.
You know, and that's, I get it.
And CEQA, I agree with you, it's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, you hate dealing with it. But if you can, it creates an anomaly in the market, because it restricts, the barrier to entry, it restricts competition, which means whatever can get done is very valuable.
Yeah, Rick Caruso is a billionaire not because he knows how to build nice malls. It's not hard to build a nice mall nowadays. He's a billionaire because he knows how to get them. Well, usually he does. He just got his butt kicked in San Diego. But typically he gets it done.
Well, on the housing thing, so I mean, you can go, and this is a bad example, but I use it anyway. You can go to any California Association of Realtors, whether it's Leslie, Appleton Young, or Joel, and they're all talking about housing shortage. I think at least one or two of our speakers today said we don't have enough houses. I've been hearing that for a long time. Okay, so we've seen a somewhat of a recovery in prices. Okay, feeling a lot better today. If you're commission-based income, we feel better today than we did a few years ago. Values are up. But apparently we're not up enough to get KB or whoever it may be to go out and start building some property. So do we need another 5%, another 10%? At what point do we see builders building houses?
I will tell you, first of all, there's no such thing as a national housing market. Because if you need a home in Riverside, you don't care what it is in Orlando, right? Or Texas, you need it here. So you're looking at what the issues are, right? Right now, the costs, whether it's direct costs or listed costs or fees costs, but if you look at what an average builder will cost him about 110 in some areas, like Chino and others, it's even more, because there's a land residual that plays into it. And so if you look at typical equation, and it changes from time to time depending on values, but it used to be the rule of thumb, right? It was a third the land, a third the cost of construction, a third everything else, profit and interest and everything else. So if you're at 110, to have a healthy builder's market, you need to be around the 300 to 350 to start really getting a lot of housing built. A lot of builders have found a different formula because of Wall Street and the way financing is and the way you show returns and what the business model is. They find a way to leverage funds, and they're basically almost fee developers. They used to be making a lot of their money off the land, right? You bought a piece of land for $100. By the time you finish the house, remember in the good days, that house, you planned to sell it for $300,000. By the time you got through CEQA and everything else, you were selling it for $450. So you made a lot of money on the appreciation of that, not really because costs have really changed. But anyway, I think at around $350 in the closer the eastern portion of the Inland Empire, not Chino or Claremont, but out this way, in Riverside East, you have to be at least at 350 to 380 before you see a robust home builders coming back and turning products.
I get a slightly different explanation. I don't think it's, again, we're disagreeing the numbers on that one. But you're talking about structural issue. I'm talking about something cyclical. Look, the reason I'm not building a lot of new single-family homes is because there's not a lot of demand for single-family homes, because we're just getting out of the credit problems. I mean, it's just starting to loosen up now. You're seeing better financials, you're seeing better incomes, you're seeing more jobs. People are going to want to start to get back into the single-family market, and some of that's going to be taken out of the single-family rental market, as I already mentioned. When we talk about housing shortages, you got to be critical. That's an overall housing shortage, not to be confused with the cyclical shift that we've gone through between the rental and the owner-occupied markets. We're still coming out of that. And I think that over the next couple of years, as we continue to come out of that and homeownership rates start to rise, then you're going to see a demand back towards single family, and you'll start seeing more construction on that front at that particular point in time. And then it'll be a couple more years before we run up against, bam, we hit the wall, we can't build any more of this because it's taking years and years, and everybody's asking for money and all that kind of stuff. And that's when you start seeing the shortage kick in again. So I think it's important to do the cyclical aspect as well as this kind of longer-term structural aspect. The longer-term structural aspects are real. I mean, look, over the last 20 years, with 13% of the nation's population, we have 8% of the new building permits. That's not structurally sustainable in the long run. So,
Look, a lot of things is like you said, structural. Tax policy and everything else. We prefer. Look, you go to wealthy nations, even Switzerland and Geneva. Literally, 67% of people who are making a lot of money live in what we call here government housing. People are just not investing in single-family home or in that type of real estate as the primary investment in life. In the U.S., we made it sort of a primary investment. We have tax breaks, we have interest, all kinds of things to stimulate home ownership, which for all good reasons. But it's not universal. It's how you prefer it. Like we talked about water, right? You could say we're exporting water, but look at the cycle. To get 1 pound of beef takes about 700 to 800 gallons of water, right? Here we get the alfalfa, the feed, and everything else. Yet we subsidize all of that so we can get inexpensive meat, right? Primary protein in America is meat. But if you put down subsidies just enough to where you depress or you increase the meat cost by 10%, let's say, and you depress the demand by 5%, you free up literally 50% more water for human consumption without even doing anything. But you're subsidizing that, right? So there's a lot of, the answers are simple, but simple is not synonymous with easy, because politics are involved, and you got the ag lobby and everybody else, all these interests. And what he said was right. Get involved, because when no one says anything, it keeps on going. And we've got to a point where nobody's really participating. Maybe now they'll participate more because of your friend Trump, which you obviously like a lot. But the point is, not even him can be single-handedly responsible to change the United States. This is a multi-systemic, economy. There's a lot of things in operation. There's politics involved. There's people involved, special interests involved, a lot of things involved. And the only way it ever changes is with participation. Unfortunately, that's the one thing that we got to get people to do.
So not even Trump can do it. John Kasich is my guy, and he's just, God, maybe he'll win Ohio. We'll see. Anyway, we've only got time for a few more, so maybe we can get maybe some quick, short answers. We've got minimum wage. Minimum wage in California just went up January 1. Any impact on anything that we're talking about today?
I was on a panel about a year and a half ago with one of the people on the panel was the economist who does a lot of work in Silicon Valley. He says there is a breaking point. If you push the minimum wage beyond that point, one of the things that's going to happen is the people he works in Silicon Valley are going to effectively eliminate a lot more work by their use of information technology along some of the slides that Iddo had, because of the fact that it reaches a breaking point. I was the vice president of a major chicken outlet when California minimum wage went up one year. And our first meeting was, okay, how do we reduce labor? We found out at the moment we couldn't do it with technology in those days. Today, you probably could. If any of you have been to one of the fast food outlets, I forget which one it is right now, and you go in and there's a computer on the table, you order off the computer, you pay off the computer, you've eliminated the waitress, you have this person bringing you food, and that's it.
Yeah, that's how Sonic is. If you've been to Sonic lately, yeah.
I would just tell you, maybe
Don't do that to yourself. Sonic.
Sonic.
I can tell you one thing. I think it's always looking at the wrong place. Minimum wage is not the problem. Education is. So I tell you, I was asked to talk to this gathering of all the educators in the state of California from the private sector, and I came to them and they gave me all these reports about how bad education is. And I came and told, first of all, you didn't have to give me these reports because I gave you a clue. If you come to a country where one of the top-rated television shows is called Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? You got education challenges, you don't have to read those reports. But on the other hand, I said, we don't have an education problem in America, we have an entirely different problem. I said, if you go to any school and you study your course, the curriculum, and you graduate, you study your math, your science, you graduate, you go to any college, you can become anything you want, even an economist. Anything you want, you can. The issue is that even if you go to the inner city schools with the worst situations and only 5% of the kids graduate and go to college, they're reading the same books with the same teachers. Why are they going to college? You'll find out if you go to the homes of those kids, you go back to those homes, there's education culture in those homes. Somebody's telling this kid, go to school, don't go to work. Go to school, finish your classes. So what we have in America is really a cultural issue. We don't value education as a central core value like we talk about it is. And so what we do, what I told, my conclusion to them was, we gotta go to Madison Avenue, New York, call the advertising agencies, give them some money, and have them figure out how to come back and educate people. Like we said, education is an investment, and it does have tangible returns. You will live better. And it's the biggest bargain in America because it's free for most of it. It's free. It's the biggest bargain in the world. People don't know that you go to other countries, you want kids to go to school, you pay for it. It's not for free. It's not like in America where the government, our taxpayers are paying for all this education. And you know what? A lot of immigrants that come from countries that value education as a constant of value, they come here, they leave 2 families to a home, you know some of those people, they pile up, they don't have a lot of money, the kids go to the worst neighborhood schools because that's what they can afford to live, and they come out engineers, lawyers, economists, doctors, whatever you want. It's an education culture. I grew up in a school. When I came to America, we have to build high schools now because of communities and your condition to build school. $100 million for a high school. $100 million. Air conditioning. I came from schools that some people got, you know, their PhDs and they're Nobel Prize winners. You know what we called air conditioning? An open window. And it didn't deter anybody from getting educated. The point is we need to get that back into our culture, and minimum wage won't be a problem because a wage reflects your contribution. The more educated you are, you have higher value, you're adding more value to the economy, you're going to make more. And why not make everybody make $100,000 a year as a minimum wage? Why stop at 15, right?
What's the magic number? Okay, we're running out of time, so I've got one last question. We'll see if everybody can tackle it. And it's truly a residential real estate question. I mean, everybody in this room is making their income based upon commission, which is tied into prices, and of course unit sales. So it appears as though the general consensus of the meeting today was 2016 is probably going to be a little better than 2015. 2015 certainly was a little better than 2014. So
Yes.
yes.
Next 2 years, yes.
So we're going to
A little better.
a little higher prices.
Prices up 6-7%, sales continue to increase slowly.
Unit sales up as well a little bit. So we'll do a little better than we did before. If we work harder, then we'll do a little bit better than the rest.
Well, I have to tell you, it's a lot better than it was back in the days when the dinosaurs were rolling when I started teaching.
Yeah, I think what you should do CICWA for real estate agents. That's it. So if you had less real estate agents, you probably do better. Supply and demand. You have a lot of people working, chasing the same deals.
Well, yeah, but half the agents don't close a deal, you know. Shall we put you on the spot? Raise your hand if you didn't close an escrow in the last 12 months.
If you did not.
There's people lying in this room. Sorry. 55% of the agents don't close a deal. Okay, so we're going to have a little better year. We're not setting any records, but we're going to be okay. So we're going to be here next year. And are we going to say something similar a year from now? Do we feel 2017 is a similar trend, or is that too far out to get confident?
Get your checkbook out, and then we'll figure it out.
I think I would say this in conclusion.
The economists have spoken.
Trends are good. You know, the old saying is if your neighbor is out of a job, that's a recession. If you're out of a job, it's a depression, right? It depends how you view it.
Right.
So look, real estate is a local business, right? We in this region are going to build a project. We're going to invest about $8.5 billion, creating about 33,000 jobs over the next few years. You get closer where that happens, there's going to be demand for housing, there's going to be demand for other. I don't know what the housing demand will be out in Chula Vista, but closer to where those type of investments are being made, which directly impact jobs and demand for housing, whether they rent or they own, the opportunity is going to be there. If you have 30,000 jobs, there's 30,000 opportunities to sell somebody a home or rent him an apartment and do something.
Yep. Well, let's close with this. We've been having this event at this hotel for the last 5 years. For those of you that were here early, have you ever seen any more people in this hotel? I mean, every single one of these conference centers were filled with something. So, I mean, that and who's by, you go to, I like to boat and do dune buggies and stuff like that. You go to the river this past summer, the sandbar was full with brand new boats. You go down to Glamis and Akatia Wells, everybody's got a new dune buggy and a new RV. So something's a little different than it was a few years ago. So anyway, I want to thank everybody for coming. Give our speakers a big round of applause. Thank you very, very much for coming.